Yeah, we're off. Cat, you gotta move. You gotta move, cat.
Her husband as being Osiris.
And I want it painted black. No colors anymore. I want them to turn black. I see the girl with my dress in that summer glow. I have to turn my head until I got to go. I see a line of cars and they all painted black. With flowers and my love, but never to come back. I see people turn their head and quickly look away. Like a newborn baby, it's just happens every day. I look inside myself and see my heart is black. I see my red doors and I want it painted black. Maybe then I fade away.
Hey, Diane, good to see ya.
It's an easy facing up when you are what is done. No more I can see what people do. I could not possibly happen into you. If I don't harm it, I'll bring to the setting sun. My love will love for me before the morning comes. What is it, baby? Baby, baby, like. I want to see you, baby. Baby, baby, like.
Evening and welcome to Paranormal Into the Night, right here on the Late Late Horror Show YouTube channel, across the country, across the globe, across the universe. Who knows? Maybe an ancient.
Okay, this guy doesn't look Christian with all that stuff around him. So let's see how he handles Gary Wayne. This should be interesting.
Alien has it on the iPhone or something. It's taking it off. Anyways, I am Dino. I'm your host, and it's been a while since I talked to Gary Wayne. Geez, I think it's been 3 years or so. But I'm happy to have him here. Gary Wayne. He's the author of the Genesis 6 Conspiracy. But we are going to be talking about fallen angels, vampires, Nephilim, and then we'll get into his book and all kinds of other things. But I really want to get into this fallen angels and vampires and Nephilim. So, as always, hit the thumbs up, hit the subscribe, hit the bell notification, all that good stuff. Everybody in the chat, I see you all. Tracy, Cryptomaria, Connie Clary, Angel, JLR, Bubba. Yeah, I see you, Bubba. Modets, that's right. Archiana's here. Everybody, you guys all.
It's already glary. Hang on, let's see if I can fix that.
That's for sure. Thank you all for being here. If you guys got a question, please be sure to capitalize it so it stands out. You could always super chat it, and I'll go back and I'll see it. But
hey, Trey, it's good to see you.
Question. Be sure to put it in all caps just so I see it, and I'll try because we're going to be covering a lot of things, and I'll bring you in here in a minute, there, he's waiting alongside here. I like this little restream thing, with the video, bringing people in and all that. It's like they're in the waiting room waiting to come on, But I got to tell you guys right off the bat, it's a controversial kind of subject matter. Anything dealing with the Bible or religion in general, people could get upset when you start talking about certain things. I would say just keep an open mind. Listen to what we got to say. If you don't like it, I guess leave. But there is some discretion there on my part to let you guys know.
I'm not a turkey. I'm an emu.
whether you take it as entertainment, that's okay too. You're listening to us, so whatever. If it's a show, if you're learning something different from this, whatever. But so that is it. That's it. Let's have some fun. Let's talk to Gary Wayne, and here he is. Let me bring him in here real quick. Gary Wayne, let me make sure. Oh, geez. See, why isn't this working? It's like I got to take me out of the picture and bring you on. Why is that? Let me see. First time using this,
Part
you
of the
guys.
conspiracy.
Right? Oh, geez, we're going there already. Nice. There we go. I guess I'm going to have to change from you to me when I'm talking. But Gary Wayne, how are you doing, my friend?
Very good. Sometimes the voice, when somebody's talking, the screen will go back and forth. We'll see what happens. So,
No, what do you think of hard Indian? I said emu.
and also, I was listening to you talk to the people in the chat. So, yeah, by all means, I love taking questions from the chat room. And I am a Christian contrarian, but do not worry about that. You might be amazed at what's actually written in the Bible, and you might be amazed at how much I know about polytheism and the occult and secret societies and a whole bunch of different things that I can go pretty deep on. So I think we ought to have a lot of fun with what we're talking about, because we're all trying to just learn more about where we are, why we're here, and where we're going.
Oh, yeah, for sure. The thing is, and I'm going to have to do this until I figure it out, you guys, to switch from me to Gary, to me to Gary, until I figure it out. I should be able to split the screen out, but it's not working. I'm pressing it. But anyways, yeah, the whole thing that got me into this subject matter, well, you know what? The people on the channel know that there are perks for channel memberships, and I've done 2 shows with you before, Gary, like 4 years ago, and we talked about secret societies and stuff like that. So those are up for the channel members, so they get exclusive access to the back catalog of all the Paranormal Into the Night shows that I did in the past. So it's really cool. But what got me into this, and I thought of you immediately, Gary, was this new show that's on Netflix. It's called Midnight Mass. And it's done by Mike Flanagan. You're probably like, who? I don't know who that is, but he's done some things, and he's very, very interesting. It deals with the fallen angels, vampire mythos, and it's just a very complex storyline. You know, he goes into the religious fundamentalism, the ancient blood curse, but where we should probably start is where all of this kind of begins, is in heaven, right? I mean, this is where this all begins, right, Gary?
Well, it doesn't really matter what perspective people are coming at it from whatever culture, whatever religion. It goes right back into prehistory, maybe even to super prehistory. And this is about a fallout that takes place in another dimension, which is known biblically as heaven. And it has to do with a rebellion of angels that become known as the gods of polytheism. And so you get a breakdown of religions that are out there. When it's polytheist, which is worshipers of the angels and the multiple angels that are in the pantheon. And then you have monotheism, and there's a couple of different versions of monotheism that are out there as well. So this is an ancient rebellion that is led by an individual, or not really provided his name other than Satan or the proud angel. The secret societies will call him Lucifer, or the great architect of the universe. And just as we get Lucifer in King James Version Bible, that's not really his name. It's a name that's been inserted. It's an Italian word that goes back to Venus, and words associated with Venus for a Hebrew word that is Hel, Heylel. And typically El is the sort of the compounded second half of a word for a name for an angel. So Michael or Gabriel or Azazel or Uriel, all the sort of famous sort of angels that might be known out there, that will end their name with El. And if people want to know a little bit later on in the chat why Shemiyaza doesn't, I can explain that for you as well. That might make some sense to you. So this is about the rebellion that takes place, and you have this sort of perpetual ongoing battle between the forces that are following the rebellious ones and those who are loyal to Christians would call the God of the universe, the omnipotent God. And in polytheism, they believe in something called dualism. So this is a perpetual war, whereas this only goes on for a limited set period of time, as a monotheist would look at it. But what it does do is sort of connect people into where we are today, that this is the yin and the yang. This is the good force and the evil force. This is all of those types of dualistic good versus evil aspect that one never gains an upper hand. So polytheist belief will suggest that the God of the Bible is no more powerful than the gods of the pantheon. And that this is actually the God of the Bible is the one that goes rogue from amongst all of the other fallen angels, as Christians would understand it, but the gods of the pantheon, and sort of tried to usurp control over the physical universe and other areas as well. So you have this rebellion that's taking place that leads. I'm sorry, I'm just going to finish up and say,
okay, right.
After that, we get the ripples of everything that sort of comes afterwards.
Okay, yeah, no, I'm sorry and there's a delay here too, that, whatever. I like to interrupt quite often when I hear something, the gods of the pantheon, I would like you to explain that a little bit more, because like, what I'd like to know, and we got a lot of this is probably going over people's heads. They're going like, what is this? What is he talking about? Oh my God. But I mean, as simple as we can explain it, like these fallen angels, up in heaven, who are these angels? Like I'm just trying to wrap my head around where this all began. Where did God create the race of the, you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, the angels are created before the physical universe, and they're actually there at the creation of the universe. And the angels are part of what they call the host of heaven, which is the Hebrew word for Saba, which means an army. So you have rank and hierarchy within this army of angels and different orders of angels. So you're going to have like dunamis and which is basically meaning powers, and exousia, and I'll put them into English words: principalities, dominions, powers, mighty ones, seraphim, cherubim, ophanim, archangels, and more. There are a whole order of ranking that are amongst these angels. And so when you look at a pantheon, when I talk about that's sort of the hierarchy of the main angels that are organizing that particular religion. And they seem to be, people sort of understand these pantheons as being different polytheist religions around the world, but they're really not. So you basically have a ranking set of goddess and god in a pantheon. And you've got parent gods and you've got offspring gods. And we can get into that. I wouldn't really spend a lot of time on it, other than the fact that if the parent gods died or disappeared, then the offspring gods or the lower gods would rise up to take place in that sort of army sort of setting. So you have mainly 7 in a head pantheon of gods, and they're typically the same angels and gods that are talked about in the 7 angels in Gnosticism as they are in Taoism or Taoism. All of the pantheons around the world with the main 7 angels and all the other angels below, they are the same angels, just with different vernacular names. So you have, as the offspring gods after the flood, you have like Isis as the female goddess, the mother goddess, and then you have her husband as being Osiris. And so if you move that over to let's say the Greek pantheon, you've got, as Osiris's equal would be Zeus. and Poseidon is his brother, which is more of a god of the water or the underworld. And if you move that over to the Sumerian pantheon, you've got Enki as that main god that's probably more equivalent with Zeus, and Enlil is probably more equivalent with Zeus than Enki is, because Enki is more equivalent with Poseidon, if I said that incorrectly. But you sort of get the understanding that you get the same types of angels, the same type of gods with the same responsibilities in all the different pantheons around the world. And that's not a coincidence. It's because it is reflecting both before the flood and after the flood, that there was this culture and civilizations that were dominated by these religions, dominated and worshipped these gods within those cultures. And so when we understand the pantheon as being gods or biblically as fallen angels, then all of a sudden things start to make sense, and you start to see connections that most people would overlook. So then it becomes that lens that you look through prehistory through or early history as to whether or not you're viewing it through a polytheist lens of events or monotheistic lens for the events. So it's really helps to have that understanding of who the pantheon are, and that they look at within the pantheon as the god of the Bible being real, but being sort of their enemy, right? So you've got the rivals, depending on which side you're on. One's going to be good, one's going to be bad. And that's, again, that polytheist and that monotheist lens.
Okay. Okay. So, yeah, all very interesting stuff. I think one of the things I kind of wanted to get into, and I'll say it here, and hopefully you can remember and try to, like, one of the basic things are you said the angels started, and you said 7 of them? Only 7?
Well, there are 7 major ones in the pantheon, right? Yeah.
Okay, so they're the original fallen angels.
No, there was a lot more than that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, let's get to that. I'm kind of want to get to that part of it where everything fell apart in heaven and they fell to the earth, and because I want to do the tie-in with the vampire mythos, when it comes to what happened and why these angels or watchers, whoever they call them, the watchers too, have gone out of God's grace and came to earth to reap and sow or whatever. And I mean, the war took place, and how did they end up? I mean, if you believe in the point that they've become, or some of them have become vampires, right? I mean, possibly, right? And other creatures, demons.
I wouldn't say the gods have become vampires. No.
Well, no,
I would say their creations would, in a lot of cases, have become vampires, and you can trace the history back to different kinds of witches and night witches and vampires that might go back to Lilith in a matriarchal sort of perspective. But typically, a vampire is different than a fallen angel, and it's more of an allegory for an offspring of the angels, which would be a demigod that was exercising power on earth for the gods. And what happens with, well, actually, I'll let you sort of see where you want to go from there, but I just want to make sure that we're going to talk about these things as God-like, but they're not the fallen angels.
Okay. Because what I came to believe from what I was looking up, researching, and even from the show is that some of the fallen angels actually ended up becoming what you would call, so it's very complex to even say vampire, but to give the moniker vampire is what we're doing. You know what I mean? A creature that has been thrown to earth, and even Lucifer, who was banned and from heaven, and basically thrown aside, thrown to the darkness, and all these things that you hear. So none of the original fallen angels you're saying technically ended up in that kind of vampire mythos that were the offspring of these fallen angels that turned
Offspring or
into.
creation by other methods. Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, so I guess I would like to know like what technically happened with these fallen angels after the big war and where it ties into maybe some of them creating the vampires and stuff. So.
Yeah, and so when we look at fallen angels, just
Mhm.
to clarify what some of the distinctions that we're making here is that they're immortal, so they can't die. Whereas in the vampire mythos, you have vampires that are requiring the drinking of blood to give them their immortality and powers and better mental cognizance. So angels don't need that. They're above that in terms of needing that as a requirement to have immortality. And so the fallen angels, what they did was when they rebelled and before the flood, and you can look at that as a recreation of the earth from the war that destroyed the flood that would have happened between Genesis 1:1 and 1:2, or just as a lot of Christians believe that day one begins sort of the history of the earth. But during that antediluvian period before the flood, after the 6 days of creation, you have the watchers that are governing the earth. And they are the head gods and they interact with humankind throughout the earth and all the different cultures. So whether or not one looks at the history of that says there's 4 civilizations or 7 civilizations or 9 or 11 or 13, and I've heard all of those numbers.
Mm-hmm.
They're the ones that are being worshipped in all of these civilizations around the world. And then they create offspring, demigods. So that when you're looking at, let's say, in Greek mythology, Hercules, he is the offspring of a Zeus and a human female. Or Poseidon is going to, before the flood, is going to produce 12 demigod kings for the Atlantis Empire from Clymene, who's a human female. So these are part human, part god. Depending on which culture you're looking at, it could be 2/3 god, 1/3 human, as in the Sumerian civilization, or it could be 50% god and 50% human. And they are created immortal through the spirit that they get from the fallen angel as that god. And they're the ruling representatives on earth. Unfortunately, though, they don't all do good things. They turn, in a lot of cases, evil and hubris. And even in the polytheist accounts, they rebel against the gods. And so they're killed by the gods, or their bodies are killed by the gods, but their spirit doesn't die. So these become the demon spirits. And the demon spirits require bodies to interact in the physical world. So you get a merging of ideologies of the undead, which technically could be a demon, and with the vampire mythos. And what the Nephilim were doing and the Rephaim were doing to extend their lives was to drink the blood and take the life of.
Exactly right, like the royals do. That's why they live to their 90s and 100s. And the Bush dynasty, all them.
Other beings to give them that sort of life. That's where you get this melding into this sort of recreation of what their initial sort of vampires were doing. Now the gods, when they took a physical body, which they did on Earth, they did also drink blood as well as part of the rituals. But they weren't drinking that blood to keep their immortality because they're just immortal beings. I mean, the body might die, but they could recreate another body, so they can continue to look as they want because they're changeling individuals. They had the ability to create physical bodies as a dwelling place for their spirit in the physical universe. The demigods weren't able to do that once their bodies died. So the vampires are sort of that sort of conflation of this whole
Okay,
sort of
get
ideology. And when you
Get
get
away from the camera.
Dracula, who is sort of the key character that vampires are based on, as we understand them today, you get a individual that's a classic archetypical figure that is from the Tuatha De Danann, which are a giant race that escapes from Tartarus after the flood, after the rebellion, after the flood, and they escaped into Scythia. And he takes his bloodlines as, and based on Vlad the Impaler, who is called Dracula, and the A on Dracul means son of Dracula, Dracul, which is a title, and that is the word for dragon or seraphim angel, and which is what the Watchers were for the most part, or seraph and serpent-faced angels. Mm-hmm. And he takes his bloodlines back to the Tuatha De Danann that come out of Scythia, and he is a sort of a classic noble Celt, so to speak, a classic archetypical Tuatha De Danann. He's got pale skin, he's got hazel eyes, he's got red hair, he has an allergy to sunlight. Mm-hmm. He is educated at the School of Solomon in Vienna into the ancient mysteries. And he's a blood drinker throughout these rituals. And this is who that character basically is based on, is Vlad the Impaler, who takes his genealogies back to the Tuatha De Danann. And in their mythos of their bloodline, he is going to take their genealogy back through to Hercules and the Agrathi of the Scythians, and back to an angel that they would call by two different titles, one being Tamiel, and the other one, which is listed in the book of Enoch as one of his other titles, is Keziah. And so everything sort of connects back to how we understand vampires today through that mythos that was built on top of Vlad the Impaler.
So Vlad the Impaler, you can trace back his bloodline to one of the fallen angels, then, right?
Yeah, that's what they do. That's their genealogies. Whether or not that's true or not, I'll leave that for other people to digest. But that's what what's important is what they believe. And actually, Prince Charles takes his genealogies back to Vlad the Impaler.
Yeah, we talked about this before on Secret Society. So when I talked to you about that, so I do remember you talking about that. But definitely the giants, then the Nephilim that you brought up, those are the offspring of the angels, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, and they're known by different names all around the world. So they're known as the heroes or the Titans, the Earthborn Titans in Greek mythology. They're known as the
Hi, Hank, good to see you.
In Sumerian. They are the Xibalba in the Popol Vuh. They are the Styria and the Azuras of the India.
See, Hen, I told ya, Trump's got Copeland there. Stay away from Trump. Good to see you, though, Hen.
Indian history of subcontinent of India and the Miocene, on and on and on. They have names all over the world because in all of the civilizations you had the creation of these giants.
Well, I mean, so let's just get down to it. Let me ask you: are there vampires on this planet right now? I mean, what has become of the bloodlines? Have they? Has most of that just gone away? I mean, the fallen angels are still around, right? They can't die. They're somewhere either on the planet, right? So what's going on there? Are they in hiding? Are they not birthing more creatures, or are they still doing this?
So you have a couple of groups of the fallen angels. I'll get to their offspring in a minute. Okay. One are the ones who were initially involved in the creation of this demigod race. And after the flood, these angels and the ones who were creating the worst amount of crimes were put into the abyss. And again, they're put into the abyss in multiple religions. So the Gnostics, especially, it's really described well in Pistis Sophia. It actually describes all of these different kinds of watchers and things that are in this abyss. And giants again show up after the flood. So they either survive the flood or there's another incursion. And if there was another incursion of fallen angels creating these giants, they would have gone as well. But not all the angels were locked into the abyss. And in fact, there are, as I said, there's millions and millions of these angels. We get a number of 10,000 by 10,000, which could be an allegorical number in the Bible. That would be 100 million, and we're told a third of them rebelled. So that's at least 33 million. In other accounts, the numbers are uncountable. So there's a lot of angels. But the angels stopped shortly after the flood, and I think after the second incursion, with those impassioned angels being put into the abyss, gods like Baal and Zeus and Osiris, who all created demigods after the flood, were put into the abyss. And the fallen angels that aren't in there, in the abyss, they're still around. And they could, at any point in time, create demigods again, but it's against the laws of creation, as the Book of Enoch talks about. So consequence of that is you're going to do that, you're going to go into the abyss. I do expect that these fallen angels would try and recreate these beings the closer we get to what Christians would call the end time, and the rendezvous with destiny, where you have the forces of good and evil meeting together, and that they would create these beings again for that end time period. Now, giants after the flood, they seem to have had a significant difficulty in reproducing. So if you get into the Ugaritic text, for example, where the Rephaim, which is the word in the Semitic languages for the Rephaim that show up in the Bible, they are actually doing fertility rituals to Astaroth and Baal, so that Baal is going to recreate demigods because they're having problems reproducing after the flood. And so they're going to have to intermarry with humans for a couple of reasons. One, to be able to not, be sort of disappear from the face of the earth. And the other thing is that if you get too much intermarriage, you get blood diseases. And it's even looked at on in that way today, like with Habsburg disease or Habsburg jaw disease or hemophiliac disease from too much intermarriage. Right. And a whole bunch of other ones. So they need that outside blood. So what you see is a slow erosion of the size and how long that they live after the flood and what they look like. Because they would have originally looked a lot like their parents. And so whether it's Osiris or it's Zeus, they're originally depicted as serpent gods. Those are those heavenly dragons with 6 wings, the seraphim angels, the watchers, as they're called. And that's why you have gods and you have kings before the flood, and then for a while after the flood, that are closely associated with that dragon and serpentine description. And if you Google Akhenaten, that's over 1,000 years after the flood, and he's still got those serpentine looks. He's got this long protruding chin, these high cheekbones, these large wraparound eyes that would have glowed, and this elongated head, these thin lips, and you really think you're looking at a serpent at that point in time. But over time, the human interaction with the genes and the bloodlines starts to bring them more to our size and to our looks. Now, a lot of people think they have a changeling capability. Maybe they do. Maybe they inherited that. But it seems to me that the bloodlines are the ones who were ruling the world. They were the Rephaim kings. They were the ones that were running the whole elite society. They ran the religion, they ran the education, they ran the army, and the humans who were initially smaller were their servants. And so they set up that feudal society. And so that's the bloodlines that come down in the royal families today. That is still basically that nobility elite that is kind of running the world today. You don't have all of the kings on the thrones, they're just in the background. So when you get into the secret societies, you need to understand that above the Rosicrucians, which are already higher than the Illuminati and which are already higher than the Freemasons, you have the Royal Masonic orders, which are the pure bloodlines. And they're the ones that are controlling things and sit more in the background. So if you see families like the Rothschilds, that's not part of the 13 families that are at the top in the West. They are visibly seen, so they're not the ones that are running things. And the Rothschilds, they actually changed their name to Rothschild from the Bauer family. They were funded after the fall of the Templars to replace the banking arm of the Templars outside the Catholic Church, and took the name Rothschild when they set up the London Bank in about 1810 to 1812. But everybody thinks they're one of the 13 families. Well, they're not. They're just, they've been intermarried into it. They're important, but they're not the Anjou. They're not the Plantagenet. They're not the St. Clair. They're not the real bloodlines that are running things.
Yeah, so that bloodline though is still out there. I mean, it's still going.
Yeah, and within those adept rituals, they still do blood drinking. It's still part of that whole ritual about trying to give themselves better cognizant advantages and longer life. But it's a significant part of the rituals of the religion at the adept level.
Yeah, blood don't taste very well, but anyways. So when you get down to it, though, the whole mythos of vampires, you believe it is a thing, though. I know I keep prodding you with it, but it is a thing, right? I mean, not that I want vampires to come visit me or nothing like that, but I am very intrigued with that. And like I said, that connection to
where that comes from a physical aspect of blood drinking sort of monsters, and Lilith is kind of part of that from a Sumerian perspective. These are physical creatures that are created that are different than the Nephilim. They're a little bit different kind, and they would go out and do horrible things as part of the terrible ones to humankind. And so they would drink blood. And that's the Upiers. And it's, it does mix back into the Tuatha De Danann, but more sort of ceremonial as in the blood drinking as in the Oberon. So when you have Upier, understand that Uber, Uberon, Oberon, Overlord is all part of the same etymological set of words. And we see that come up as a crossover in the allegories in Midsummer's Night Dream with King Oberon, who is the king of the fairies, and the fairies are Tuatha De Danann as one of the 4 groups of fairies. And you have him being married to Titania, which is basically saying a mother goddess or a female demigod type, right? So the Titanides, as they're called in Greek mythology. So you do have some of those creatures that were there in the past, and they're very much related to like the demonic physical presence that the incubus and those type of creatures take when they take a physical form on the earth. So there's something that are a little bit unique from the Nephilim.
Yeah, I was going to say too, and you know what? If anybody wants to grab Gary Wayne's book, The Genesis 6 Conspiracy, the link is in the description to Amazon. So please feel free. It's a very interesting book, and I know you've got another one coming out, but we'll talk about that in a few. But yeah, I mean, it's. I almost wonder if a lot of these creatures that we see nowadays, even though it's more rare, it's a lot more talked about in the Bible, but we still get these appearances of, like, say, the Mothman and other creatures like that. I wonder if that has anything to do with the bloodlines passed along, and we're just turning it into something that it's not. Maybe not.
There's probably a little bit more to it.
Okay.
There's probably a little bit more to it. So the Mothman's a little different, but I think what would be kind of akin to the Nephilim would be something like the Dogman mythos.
Okay.
And if you look at in the Egyptian pantheon, you have a jackal god that's part of the parent gods named Anubis. And he actually produced offspring that looked like him. And these were warrior type of Nephilim. They were dog-headed people. And there was actually a city that, where you can call it Dog City if you want, but Sinoopolis was the name of the city, which is sort of part of the name for the Sinocephalese of the dog mythos, which is sort of the technical term for it. They show up in basically all cultures. We have a god that's worshipped by the Avim in the Bible named Nebaz, and he is the barking god. So he's a god like the jackal god in the Egyptian pantheon. And so they created those kinds of beings. And you still get people saying that they're seeing dog men even to this day.
Oh, yeah.
Whether or not that's true, but the amount of sightings, if you were to look on a map at how many sightings there would be of dog men. And there's a history that is recorded of these beings that is outside the Bible. Most of the historians, right up to past 1000 AD, were recording these dog men. So I don't think
they're still doing it today. Yeah.
Yeah,
definitely.
So,
I mean, how about Bigfoot?
Well, Bigfoot, there's some gods that are, in the Indian culture that, the subcontinent of India, that have sort of ape-like sort of descriptions, right? So Bigfoot is kind of related to the Nephilim concept. They have shiny, meaty red eyes and different other colored eyes, and depending on the account, they're hairy like the Nephilim were. They're large, but they're not as large as the Nephilim. They're intelligent. They're connected to the elementals or the little people. They're connected to caves and portals, just as Nephilim are connected to the portals. But they communicate. They tap on things, and there's even some DNA that's been found in humans that they try, and a lot of people say would be part of the Bigfoot. So I think what they are is that similar kind of creation that the gods were creating, and they created all sorts of beings. If you look at recorded polytheist history, whether or not it's the Chimera or King Habada, which is a Chimera type individual that comes out of the Epic of Gilgamesh, or if you have the centaurs, and on and on and on about all of these creatures, and so they're either created with DNA manipulation or through sexual copulation. Typically, how it comes out of prehistory is through some sort of sexual copulation that creates these things. And you also have like the lion myth, right? You have the lion myth of Moab and Gad in the Bible, but in polytheist history, you have gods like Mahis or Nergal and Sekhmet and Bast, who produce offspring that look just like them. And so when you look at Black Panther as a superhero movie, that's why you have that goddess Bast that's in there, because that's the goddess who created the panther cat type of Nephilim that whole superhero character is based on. And so they use the actual root to that within the movie. So you've got all sorts of different creations, and Bast would have created almost unlimited kinds of creatures that are really bizarre and weird, and kind of equivalent to who Tiamat is, which is a Leviathan or serpent-like god out of the Sumerian pantheon, who creates all sorts of weird things like scorpion beings that have the ability to destroy the world. And if anybody's ever read Revelation 9 and what follows Abaddon and Apollyon out of the abyss in the end time, the description of these scorpion beings are identical to what's recorded in Revelation 9. And so it's hard to imagine all of the different things that were going on. You have to put together all of the accounts of all the different cultures around the world to get sort of that understanding as to there was a lot of different creatures. So some that were more intelligent than others, some bigger than others, and some with additional powers than others.
Yeah, and I was going to ask you why that is. I mean, why did we get such a variety of different creatures from all of these, the fallen angels? I mean, when they started to procreate with humans, both bloodlines from Seth and
Pretty sure the fallen angels had sex with 200 animals as well.
what was the other one? Cain, the females and the males.
Yeah.
I mean, the fallen angels, what kind of form were they that they would create such varying degrees of creatures? You know what I mean?
So let's go back to the vampire analogy and back to Dracula.
Okay.
And make the connection from there. So in the vampire mythos, as we understand it coming down from Dracula, you have sort of a good versus evil sort of scenario there, and the vampires are the enemies of humankind. And they prey on humankind and they drink their blood and they kill them, and that gives them their immortality as the undead. And they're followers of the pantheon. And so they're taking their orders and reporting up the sort of hierarchical order to the fallen angels. And so the Nephilim were created as enemies of humankind. And what they're doing is we're wanting to replace humans with these demigods and to change the whole world from how it was originally created. So they were changing the DNA of humans. They were changing the DNA of all of the animals. They were changing the plant genomes. And biblically, we get an understanding of this out of the flood story, because the flood is the resolution to the creation of these giants before the flood and the damage that they had done and the crimes against humanity that they had done. And we're told that not just that the earth was full of violence, but that the violence actually were part of the Nephilim story that starts off the flood story. They're interconnected, and that the whole earth was corrupted. And that's the Hebrew word shakah. And that means destroyed, decayed, ruined, words like that suggest that everything on the earth, for the most part, whether it was the plant genomes or the animals or the humans, their DNA or their plant genome had been changed. And that only 8 were selected. And again, the flood story is in every culture, and it has a very similar macro level detail on it, as opposed to the micro details on it. And you have to separate the polytheist versions of human survival stories from the flood from the giant survival stories, because there's a mix of both in polytheism. Yeah. And there's only 8 that are selected by God in the Bible version who do not have that DNA, that are changed and are spiritually loyal to God. And so God also calls all the animals to the ark, the ones that he knows are representatives of the species. Kind is the poor translation for the Hebrew word that should be translated as species, into the ark, because he knows which ones haven't been corrupted. Now, what we're told is that's not the case with the living creatures in the ocean, just the ones on the earth that are destroyed. So I think to bring that sort of full scale is that these creatures were created to destroy humankind so that they wouldn't be raised in the future time to be like angels and to judge the rebellious angels for the crimes they committed against humanity and all the crimes that their creations and their offspring did against humanity. So bringing that back to the vampire scenario, humankind are the prey and the enemy, and the Christian church is also the enemy of the vampires. All of that allegory has been laced in because it's got a deeper meaning to the meaning of Dracula and the patriarchal bloodlines of the Nephilim through the dragon as the allegory as opposed to the fairy for the matriarchal bloodline. So you have that all encapsulated in the modern vampire tales. And that's, kind of what you need to sort of look at is what is the meaning underneath the fairy tale?
Yeah, no, definitely sounds good. Yeah, and in the chat, of course, you guys, that's why I started to show off with, it's a touchy subject matter when you start talking about Bible, religion, and the past when it comes to God and angels and stuff like that. So, just have a kind of a kind conversation back and forth with each other. I saw that something went on, but yeah, just chill. It's just a conversation. It's to have. You should be able to converse back and forth with what's going on and what people are saying. So that's all it is. But I mean, very
It's not about
interesting.
imposing your.
Hey, Jay, good to see you, mate.
It's not about imposing your beliefs on other people, because you can't force people to believe anything.
All right.
But you ought to make a choice as to what you believe.
Jeremiah, how's your father-in-law going?
And what you're looking at from prehistory is a couple different lenses. And what you're looking at as the world today is a couple of different lenses. But we ought to focus more on what our common denominators are and what's really going on and try and figure that out. But ultimately, you're going to have to figure out what you believe.
Right, exactly. And you did talk about the manipulation of like DNA and stuff like that too, and just trying to tinker with, getting rid of the human race, basically. You know what I mean? Where do the aliens play a part in that at all?
Yep.
Or am I going way
No,
out?
you're not going way out. I think they do. And I think we're going to see that in the next decade or so, as things are moving forward with things kind of formally introducing us to them. And we're going to see kinds. And these are going to be many different kinds of the angelic creation. And there will also be, the fallen angels, and they're going to be represented as, superior beings that are all united together. And you're going to need to make a choice to join them or not. And that's why it's important to figure out what you believe. And when you look at some of the creations of the fallen angels, you have like the elementals, which are at the bottom level of the hierarchical order of the fairy group, because you've got 4 different groups of fairies as I talked about. And the elementals fall into 4 different groups. One is like the salamanders, and they are like a larger reptilian type of being. And then the 3 groups that are left are little people. It's the best way to describe them. So you've got good-looking ones like Tinkerbell. You have mischievous ones that are like the leprechauns, and you got the ugly ones like the trolls and the dwarves and the gnomes. And all of these beings are created for a purpose in that hierarchy. And one of those are the gnomes that kept the genealogy, technology, and knowledge for the demigods and the gods.
Wow.
In the physical world. And
are there still gnomes out there, Gary?
There are, and they have flying missions through portals.
Gary, I figured it out. Sorry.
Dolmens. Yeah.
I figured it out. I got the 2 videos.
People, and they do
Hi, Talia.
on them. And I have a couple
Praise Jay, you know that, brother. We're praying for him.
Kidnappings and the beings that are these beings, and they're called the gray gnomes, the gray fairies, and they're identical to the grays in the alien mythos. So they've been with us all through history, just called something different.
Yeah.
And so I think we're going to see all of that come out soon. And we're going to see what a lot of people would call the new Atlantis coming about. And the new Atlantis is this era. It's really the new age in the new age religion, where you have this golden age, this new golden age as it was before the flood, when the gods walked amongst the earth with the human, and they created the demigods, and they created all of this knowledge that we're just catching up to today with the ability to manipulate DNA that they had before, because we couldn't build things like Machu Picchu or the pyramids and on and on and on. And we have evidence that their technology was greater than what we have today, but we are catching up because we're getting into the days of Noah. Okay. And so when we have all of that technology and all of that beings that were created before the flood, we need to understand that these beings have been here all along, and they're going to reintroduce themselves as they get ready for this new age, that you have a harmony of religion, which you might know as Gnosticism, which comes out of Theosophy. Gnosticism produced Theosophy, which produced New Age with the entrance of the alien phenomena that we had since the late 40s. And it is going to re-merge with the knowledge of science, because it was designed to be that bridge, because in the beginning, science and mysticism were the same. And that's going to be united when that all comes back together. And that's what they're trying to recreate, is that new golden age.
Yeah, and somebody asked the question, where are the demons today? Where are they? Are they all in the abyss, or are there some out there still?
It's both. So
Okay.
in Ezekiel 32, we get some of these demons that are talking to some of the Rephaim kings, and to the Pharaoh in particular, and they're locked in the sides of the abyss. But not all the demons are in the abyss, just the worst ones were. The ones who were the terrible ones and who were slain, and their bodies didn't go to sleep because they have an immortal spirit. They're not allowed into heaven. And so they either wander the earth or in the underworld, or they went to the abyss. And so we have demons, just as we've had demon possession all throughout our history, and even in the Bible we get that. Those are the devil spirits in the New Testament, which goes back to the Greek word daemon, or demon, different than the devil, which is diabolos, which is the word used for Satan. And these are the bodiless spirits that thirst for a body, because they're like in dry places, looking for a place to rest. They can only rest and interact in the physical world when they suppress the host. So I think the technology that is being developed with the cloning and transhumanism is going to create what they call an oikotarian, or a dwelling place for the spirit, for these demon spirits to interact again as the technology catches up to permit that. So when you see all of the movies that are out there on consciousness transfer, that's really the allegory of what they're talking about, is being able to take these demon spirits and give them a physical body so that they can physically, integrate into the physical dimension again.
Okay. Anyways, I want to tell you again, Gary, you should watch Midnight Mass, okay? Because of the whole mythos and all that good stuff that's in there. I think you should.
I will watch it.
Yes,
Yeah.
Put it on your list. But I tried my best to get that movie or that series and the fallen angels and the vampires into this, but you are just so knowledgeable with all of this stuff. I'll admit, some of it just goes over my head. I can't keep up with all of it. You've done a lot of research on all of this, and it's just so interesting. Yeah, and again, check out his book. And
it goes over his head because he's not a Christian.
The link below. But we might as well get to like kind of let's get to the end times a little bit without trying to. I don't know if you can do it. I don't know if what's going on right now has anything to do with it. I don't want to use those words that's going on, but let's talk about end times a little bit, because everybody says it's approaching. We're nearing the end times. I don't know what to believe in anything anymore. I know that the world is a little messed up. It's been for a long time. What is your take on the end times? And is it approaching?
Well, I think we can see it on the horizon. In most cultures and religions, there is this period that is talked about. So they have a lot of similarities. We went through 2012, and that sort of had people scared because we entered into that new age period, right? And the thing that people have to keep in mind is that age is 2,360 years. So just because you started into that that period. Doesn't mean it was going to happen on that day, but and that's an area where even in that age, in the age of Hastings, is that there's going to be an apocalypse by fire. So it's a matter of when and how that is told all around the world. And so when we look at what it takes for an end time in most of this, there has to be a Messiah type of figure, whether or not it's Lord Maitreya that is in the Hindu or the Buddhism or the Mahdi in
talk about
Shia, Islam. You've got this figure that is the one, the new Buddha is also a reference out of the East. You have this figure that is talked about to lead us into this new age. And biblically, you get that as Jesus coming back and into the millennium. So you're going to hear this new age as 1,000-year reign, right? It's kind of everywhere and in the Bible as well. And so what does it take to sort of bring that about? And what that takes to bring that about is that there has to be a coming together of the world. So globalism has to happen. And it's hard to have a universal religion, which is required, and a universal government in how we see things today, right? Those are two big stumbling blocks that you have to get over. That doesn't mean it can't happen, but it's going to take some time, or it's going to take catastrophes, apocalyptic nature catastrophes for this to happen. Or revelations of like the aliens, where in all of the genre of space and alien entertainment you have, as soon as we find out we're not alone in the universe, we come together with the world government and the same religion. It's all throughout that sort of genre. So there has to be things like that that are going to happen to speed that up, because there's no way this world is going to just get along together. And so you're going to have some wars and rumors of wars. You're going to get into the birth time period. Things that kind of look like we're in the end time, but it's just sort of building that up. But we're not into the last 7 years until you have a world government and you have a world religion, and there's a 7-year covenant from a Christian perspective. And that the world will come together from a New Age perspective to have this harmonic convergence, which is required to evolve or vibrate into the next level of consciousness or into Godhood, depending on how you want to look at that.
Okay. So somebody mentioned in the chat, I don't even know what it means really, ask about, let me see, ask about word serpents today. Is that part leading up to the end times? Does that make any sense?
Not sure what a word serpent is. Maybe they can clarify that.
Yeah, that kind of threw me off there, Gap. So I guess if you can clarify a little bit better. When this happens,
what we will see is, I think we'll see the serpentine gods, the seraphim angels, the watchers.
That's what I was going to ask.
As an advanced species. And they're the ones who provided all of the knowledge to humans for the most part. They provided civilization. They provided the agrarian society. And so typically that can be understood as the word as well. So that might be what the word serpent is sort of connecting.
Okay. Oh, they're all saying world serpent, world serpent, world serpent. So
the world serpent, yeah.
Yeah.
Just like the Ouroboros, right? Yeah. Well, that's going to be part of that whole, symbolism that's going to come about. That's just a serpent or a dragon clutching its tail. But in the globalist symbolism, you're going to see the earth in a lot of that symbolism that's encircled by that snake, because these are the seraphim gods who rule the earth and provided the knowledge and will continue to provide the knowledge going forward.
And the fallen angels that ended up in the abyss, the ones that will come out and during the end times, how is that even going to be possible?
Yeah.
Like, do they got a key somewhere that they're going to unlock the door and just let themselves loose? Being funny there, but go ahead.
Well, I think there's going to be a lot of attempts to release them before the ordained time, so that if we understand where the abyss is, typically people would indicate that it's in the earth, but it's not in the earth in this dimension, right?
Okay.
It's in another dimension. So you've got AI that's being developed, and you've got quantum computing that's being developed that is working together so it can search multiple dimensions at the same time. I think it's being developed to find the abyss and to find the Atma particle that contains all the knowledge of the universe, invisible, that merger particle, and transmits that knowledge through quantum entanglement, which will provide part of the pieces to godhood, which is knowledge, and the other one is immortality. So they're going to have to offer some sort of physical immortality with new body.
Well, 60's not so old anymore. Like if he was 80 or something, you'd think the odds were really long. But 60, he's young enough to beat it. I hope he does, Jay. Prayers for him.
Or with replacement parts or transhumanism, however we're going to get there. Yeah. So I think what's going on is that there's a number of people that would love to release these gods and fallen angels out of the abyss before the ordained time are going to try and do so.
Okay.
Biblically, in the Revelation, it's an angel that comes down from heaven with a key.
Amen, Talia.
At a specific ordained time.
Okay.
And then they join you.
Okay, so
some people say the angel falls from the heavens, so it's a fallen angel that does it. But typically in Revelation, it's all that's anything that's involved with an angel in heaven is doing the beckoning of what needs to happen in the end time. So it doesn't really matter to me whether it's a fallen angel or a righteous angel. And what's interesting is that you have a couple of accounts of Azazel being either put into the abyss or being put into the constellation Orion. And so if Azazel, who is Abaddon and Apollyon, is the one that falls, let's say, from Orion with a key to open the abyss as the king of the abyss and the leader of the host, that would make sense to me as well.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know. Most people don't know, but I mean, I can go really deep here and talk about certain things like how are they even, or how is this even being allowed to happen? How is the end times even being allowed to happen when there's an almighty being? But I'm not going to go there because I don't want to get too deep and get people too upset. But there's definitely a lot of things that I question and I wonder. But wow, you flipped, Gary. Your video is like sideways now. Hopefully you can fix that. But somebody asks in the chat, what's the difference between the Cog or the Gog War and Apollo 200 million man war? Make any sense to you? And yeah, I don't know what happened, Gary, but something happened to your camera. I can't hear you now, and you flipped. So let me take you. Yeah, see, you're sideways. You're almost upside down. I don't know. That's weird. I don't know how that happened. I'd like to at least hear you. I can't hear you. So we'll let Gary fix it. Nope, still don't hear you. I can't hear you. They can't hear you. But yeah, pop back in if you can. But yeah, very interesting question. I'm not quite sure what that means. Yeah, that was kind of weird that happened like that. But I most certainly, hopefully he'll be back in a second here, and I could pop him back in. But yeah, I can go very deep and dark. I did try my hardest with asking the questions, but Gary is very, very educated on this kind of religious Bible mythology stuff, and it's something I have to still read up on a little bit and get to know a little bit more. Hopefully, come on, Gary, let's get you back here. I got a couple more questions before you end up leaving here. It's funny that he talked about the gnomes too, because I should have brought up my gnome story, right? And I think I'll talk about it if he doesn't come back. And well, I'll start it, and if he comes back, we'll see what happens. Here he is. Let's see. Okay, so looks like you're back. Okay, are you back? And now what did I do? There we go. I still can't hear you though, Gary. Now I can.
Well, okay, can you hear me now? Okay,
Yeah.
no, I had to get out and get back in for some reason. So
Okay,
the question was, is there a connection between Gog and the 200 million man war?
Yes, there you
Okay,
go.
so
Yes. Sorry about that.
Of all the wars, there's two major wars. There's Armageddon, and there's this Gog war. So let me connect the dots. So Armageddon happens at the end of the last 7 years. From the chronology, in terms of how Revelation is laid out, the 200 million man war happens at the time of the opening of the abyss, which is before the midpoint, just before the last 7 years. Antichrist comes to the midpoint of the last 7 years. The Gog war, which is Ezekiel 38 and 39, is Gog and Magog. And understand, Gog is not in any of the table of nations in terms of the descendants of Noah. In fact, Gog is a offspring of Iapetus, a Greek god, but Magog is in the table of nations, and so it's describing these nations. So it's Magog that is leading.
Yeah, it's your internet connection there, Gary. It's cutting out and in and out, in and out. You're sideways again. But your internet, yeah, it keeps cutting in and out. So you might have to leave again and come back. Do apologize, but yeah, it's the internet connection you got.
It's interesting stuff.
Yeah, so he'll come back in a second. Hey, Space Herpes, what's going on? Takaho, Dambaski, Thulo. Yeah, you guys are gremlins, I tell you, Hot Toddy says. I do want to thank all of you guys for being here, that's for sure. Good turnout for the show. I tried to get as research as much as I possibly can before he came on, because I knew it was going to be a tough show, and I am trying my best, that's for sure. I wanted him to get in and talk about the book really quick for a few minutes before we end. Overnight stream tonight, you guys, from 10 p.m. to 10 a.m. is like every night. We got Johnny Dollars tonight. Didn't get timestamps in there, so you guys will enjoy it just as much. Johnny Dollar is one of the favorites of the old time radio shows, so you guys will definitely enjoy that, and it will be fun. But Gary, pop back in just so you can talk about your book. We'll give it one last try. Get in here. We only got about 15 more minutes, Gary, so that's what we'll do. But yeah, I appreciate everybody being here. Blue Francis, make sure you guys all like and subscribe. Hit that bell notification. We are going.
Yeah, Jeremiah, my dad died, and one of my biggest regrets was I wasn't Christian at the time, so I couldn't help him. So yeah, I don't think he was saved. Mum believes in Jesus, but she hasn't got a relationship with him. I'm not sure if that's going to be enough to sort of get you in.
To be doing this on a regular basis. I've got a couple other guests lined up already, and it's going to be, the one is a paranormal investigator, and I'm trying to get, like Gary, a little deep into some of these like mythos and mythology and stuff like that. I thought it was fun trying to get some information about vampires out there, right? So let me talk about my gnome story real quick, and if Gary pops in, then he can chime in a little bit there on that. But yeah, the gnome story. It's a good thing you brought that up, talking about the fairy folk and all that. I saw a gnome when I was young. I was about, I know, and people are gonna go like, "What are you talking about? You saw a gnome?" But you heard Gary. Gary was talking about it. The gnome story. I was 8, 9 years old. I was with my uncle. We were in the kitchen of this older house. Let me see if Gary's still there. Yeah, but try to put. Here he comes. He comes. He's coming. We'll try this one more time, Gary. If I lose you, then
Yes.
so be it. But it is your internet connection. It keeps going in and out, but it's okay. If we lose you, we lose you. I'll try to have you back on again. That's for sure.
I just
see. Yeah. We lost you. I don't even know if you can hear me. Can you hear me? Yeah, but I can't hear you. You went sideways again. It's the weirdest thing. Let me turn you off and turn. Yeah, that's not going to work either. Put you out. Nope, nothing's going to work there for you. It's not on my end, Gary. So, yeah. So the gnome story. Let me finish it. And that's sad. I mean, we were almost at the end of the show, and we could have got it in, but you can try again if you want. I don't care. Keep trying, Gary. Keep trying. But the gnome story. Me and my uncle were in the back kitchen, playing a game we used to always play. We'd flip these quarters, and the closest to the wall, would win. It was just a fun game we would play. And there was all woods in the back, so it was a perfect spot for like, country, for something like that to happen. Perfect spot for gnomes. Well, not hobbits. Hobbits need a bigger realm. But anyways, the gnome that.
And Jeremiah, did the preacher preach your father?
We saw. We looked.
Look. Oh, Gary does come back on.
We saw it. It poked its head out. I saw it first. I told my uncle. I said, "Did you see that?"
Oh, Jeremiah, yeehaw, mate. Thank the Lord. Your father actually got saved on his deathbed. That's brilliant. God bless that preacher, the orderly preacher.
What the heck was that? And he was joking. They're always out there. Yeah. Kurt White was timed out. What's going on there, Kurt White? You got to do your. Yeah, see, I mean, people got to be a little less dramatic about things, I mean, come on, it's, people can talk about stuff, it's a thing that people can do. Have a civil discussion, but over to the left, I told him, and he's like, "What?" And he looked over, he didn't see nothing. So the next thing happened was it popped its head back out and ran around. So we're going to try this one more time. Okay, let's hope. Fingers crossed, Gary. Let's hurry up and get this through. Let's.
Yeah.
Okay. I was talking about my gnome story, and nevertheless, I saw a gnome. So, and it looked, Gary, just like gnomes are supposed to look. It was 7 inches tall. I was 8 years old. And we were in a country house, and I saw a gnome. And to this day, it's plain as day that I've seen it. So it was a paranormal experience that I like to tell sometimes because in my mind, it really happened. But you question it as an adult, you know what I mean? So whatever.
Yeah, I think you probably saw one.
There you go. I'm telling you, it was solid. It was 8 inches tall. I've seen it. But anyways, where were we?
We're talking about the Gog War and the 200 Million Man War. So
okay, and then we'll get to your book. So go ahead.
Right. So the war happens as a counterfeit Armageddon, the 200 Million Man War out of Revelation 9, and it is a counterfeit Armageddon. It is the same timing as the Gog War of Ezekiel 38-39. And we know that because it happens in the last days and it happens before second Exodus, which happens in the second half of the last 7 years. The creatures that are being described that are these really advanced hybrid organic type of weaponry of the war. We haven't quite got there yet in that technology, at least that's been revealed to us, but we're getting there. It is the same creatures that are described in Joel 1 and 2. So Revelation 9, 200 million man war, Joel 1 and 2, and Ezekiel 38 and 39 are the same war. Joel 3 is the Armageddon war in that set of prophecies. And so this is the counterfeit Armageddon that Antichrist is going to require for his Armageddon as pedigree and credibility to be the Messiah that he's going to portray him to be, but about 3.5 years before Armageddon. And the timing makes sense because after that, as talked about in the book of Daniel and in the book of Luke, he surrounds Jerusalem with the armies and sets up the abomination and is crowned the king of Jerusalem in Jerusalem at that point in time and promises peace and safety.
Huh. Okay. Very interesting. So there's your answer, you guys, to that question. Let's quickly, because we got about 10 minutes here. Let's talk about your book really quick because I know you're working on another one, right?
Mm-hmm. I am.
So quickly, Genesis 6 Conspiracy. It's been out a while. Is it still doing good?
It's still selling as well as it did right from the first year on. So it's very consistent in its sales. Wow. And continues to go. And I thought, I said I would never write a sequel to the Genesis 6 Conspiracy. Okay. But from a lot of the people who follow me, they want more information as to how does prehistory connect with the end time and how understanding prehistory helps you to understand end time prophecy. And they also wanted to hear more about how much more is said about angels and giants in the Bible, because if you're a Christian, it's not taught in church, either prehistory or prophecy. Right. And there's just so much more in there. And then I'll do a little bit of adding in the things that are outside the Bible, whether it's from the Ugaritic text or whatever I need to do to sort of add on to it. Whereas the Genesis 6 Conspiracy, it is taking sources from all around the world and sort of melding them in and telling the same story in prehistory and history and what will come about in the end time. So it's a sequel, but it's not redundant. It's mostly all new information in the new book, and it's very, very detailed. Okay, but and I'll be talking about the different kinds of Nephilim in there too.
Okay. And when's that supposed to be out?
I'm still working on it, so I'm on chapter 45 right now. So it's going to be a really good sized book again, as opposed to the 98 chapters in the first book. But it won't be quite that big. I'm hoping to have it in the publisher's hands in the first quarter and out before summer.
Okay, yeah, and like I said, the first book, the Genesis 6 Conspiracy, it's 93 chapters. It's a big book. If you want to dig deep and go into all of this stuff with Gary and read it, go buy it, get it from Amazon. The link is down there. It's very interesting. As the cat sneaks through, go on, cat. So where is the best place to follow you so that they can keep up with what you're doing? Is it following you on Facebook? You got a website?
Yeah, Facebook is the best place to follow me. I've kind of reduced my social media until I can see where to go, where it's not as difficult to talk about things. And if you can also get a hold of me through my website as well. There's a contact the author there. So that if you wanted, for example, some information on the Gog War that we talked about, I've got some documents on that. If you wanted to know about those scorpion beings out of Revelation 9, I've got documents on that. I got a 3-part series on the dog Nephilim. I've got a document on the lion Nephilim and the Tengu, which are the bird Nephilim, which are kind of like the Anunnaki offspring. And so I've got a lot of documents. If you name a topic, if you're looking for more information, just name the topic that I got it, I'll send it to you, and or you can just ask me a question.
Okay, and the website address is, because I don't think I put
that. Genesis6conspiracy.com. That's Genesis 6 with the number 6conspiracy.com. It may take me a couple weeks to get back to you, but I will get back to you.
Okay, and a few more minutes. So Brooke has a question in the chat. She says, "What is the abomination?"
The abomination is the setting up of the idol in the temple and the worship of Antichrist in the temple. So you've got two things going on there. So there's got to be a temple that's going to be rebuilt, which is part of the end time that has to be done. It's on a wing of probably the existing temple. So you're going to have a universal religion to have that. And so in Revelation 13, we get this image that is set up that causes everybody to worship or to be killed by the image. And you can't buy or sell without the AI and all of the technical stuff that's going to be linked into this. So it's a combination of that. And I think the third part of it is he's pronounces himself, at least according to the bloodlines, as the king of Jerusalem through genealogical inheritance.
Okay, very good. And Coachella Valley, again, he's bringing up the Gog thing. Is Apollo and Gog one and the same thing? Love your book.
No, they're different. So when the word that is connected to Apollo, and Apollo is a part of a series of Greek words that includes Apollyon, which is the name for Abaddon. It's Hebrew Abaddon, Greek Apollyon, who I think is Azazel. And Antichrist is the son of perdition, and perdition goes back to a Greek word that is in the same series and is rooted in Apollyon. So you almost get a connection there that Antichrist will have a bloodline that comes back down through Apollyon or Apollo. Apollo is technically a different god than Apollyon, but it's part of the same set of words.
Okay, very good. Okay, so yeah, we're at an hour and a half. That's where I keep most of my shows now because we have our overnight streams, as always, for a year here. If you dig the old time radio shows and mystery and suspense and detective shows and all that good stuff, Johnny Dollar tonight overnight for 12 hours.
No, so he had a peaceful death. That's good, Jay.
All night long.
I'm not scared of dying. I just hope it's not painful.
So you're going to have some joy. With that said, I'd like to ask you one last time, Gary, is there a vampire in the truest sense on the planet right now?
Probably.
Okay.
Probably, yeah.
Okay.
I would.
There you go.
Well, and I think you've got not only vampires from sort of an occult religious perspective, but I also think that you've got people who are pure bloodlines that are drinking the blood, and I would not be surprised if there was one of those other kinds of creatures that would have attack humans and drink their blood as well.
Okay. And I think with the whole new audience that I got here, if you would, one of these days, come back and let's go over again the secret societies. I think people would be really interested in hearing that.
It is so important to understand, people get so much misinformation, and to understand the secret societies, you have to understand the hierarchy and how the royal bloodlines fit in. Because, you talk to one person and they say it's the Illuminati, that's the most important. Some people will say the Jesuits, some people will say Freemasonry, some people will say the Rosicrucians, and the list sort of goes on and on and on. And they're all separate organizations that are working together, but you need to understand that hierarchy, and it's a great show to have. Yeah.
Oh yeah, definitely. And I do remember last time when we talked, and it was a fantastic show. So and that was a while ago. So I'm gonna go now, you guys. I'm gonna bid farewell until I see you guys in the chat for Johnny Dollar tonight. I will see you all there. And Gary, hold on for 2 minutes. I'm going to let my outro go, and then I want to talk to you after I end the stream, just for a couple minutes, and then I'll let you go. Thank you all for joining.
Okay, guys.
The thumbs up.
A spiritual secret at Sodom. Derek Gilbert's newest. And Derek Gilbert's pretty cool, guys, so this should be interesting. Let's jump ahead. There we have it.
And is there a new discovery that might give us even greater insight from the world of archaeology to confirm Bible prophecy and the accuracy of Scripture? We'll get ready to find out that and much, much more tonight with our special guest, Derek Gilbert, on Thursday Night Theology, which starts right now.
I want to tell you a story.
I used to believe that Jesus was a Catholic God, God of the Gentiles.
I imagined that Jesus was Italian. The New Testament.
Greetings and welcome to Thursday Night Theology. I am your host, Ryan Peterson, author of Judgment of the Nephilim, The Final Nephilim, the studies from Genesis to Revelation. We're going to talk about all that in a moment, but most importantly, this show is about you. This is a show where we try to explore the questions that are complex, mysterious, that get into the supernatural aspects of Scripture, Bible prophecy, whether it's the Nephilim, the fallen angelic realm, the Antichrist, the second coming of the Lord Jesus Christ, all the different mysteries that you might not hear in your church. We want to discuss it right here on Thursday Night Theology. We have a special show tonight. I'm really excited to introduce our special guest host for the night. I have to say that, writing is not easy. Research and writing is not easy. And this man has done this to a great extent. He is the author of Veneration, The Second Coming of Saturn, The Last Clash of the Titans, and many, many other titles. He's the host on Skywatch TV. He's the host of Sci Friday, View from the Bunker, 5 and 10, and the list goes on. Welcome to Thursday Night Theology. A great writer, author, researcher, speaker, friend, and very kind Christian man, most importantly, Derek Gilbert.
You are very kind. Thank you, sir. It's an honor to be here.
Oh, it's great to have you. It's great to have you, my man. Thank you so much for coming on, for spending some time with the Thursday Night Theology audience. I can tell you right now that there are a number of people who I know already have been bursting at the seams for this moment, so they're very happy. So thank you. And I really wanted to mention, because I know you're never going to say it, but it's a lot of work, and I was very blessed and honored and privileged to be invited to come to Skywatch TV, to the studios, to work with you and the whole team, Joe Horn and everyone there, and film some great shows, some great episodes that aired recently. And I was, in addition to the fact that it's such a quality production, I mean, everything is this is Hollywood level studio quality from front, just the whole thing. I was blown away. Just, it's a lot of work. And I think people, they know you as like as a host of shows and doing podcasts, but this is your job. You are there all day working, handling all sorts of things to make this production, including the whole team. So I just want people to know that it's a lot of work, and you are very dedicated, sir. So I want to, just applaud you and give you your props, because people may not know behind the scenes the amount of work that goes into just making a half an hour of TV or radio. So I really salute you for that.
That's true. And, just to give praise to God that Tom Horn has been so faithful to bring together a team that really complements each other well. And we're kind of in a transitionary period, Sharon and me, that with Tom's blessing,
yes,
we have brought Sci Friday back, a program that we started without asking his permission 7 years ago. And we are now producing that every week, along with Unraveling Revelation, which you were kind enough to guest on a couple of months back. And we're producing that under our own ministry banner. Now, we're not leaving Skywatch TV. I just was in on the panel this past week for a couple of programs with, who was it? Carl Gallups and Terry James, and I'm going to forget the other gentleman, and Tim Moore. So I was there for that. I'll be sitting in on the panel again in a couple of weeks. And I'm still doing the 5 and 10, the daily news updates. But most everything else is coming from home. In fact, we've even moved 5 and 10 to our sitting room off of our master bedroom here at our house and set up a studio there because as Skywatch TV has grown, they've had a need for new staff. And really, since we can do 5 and 10 from home, and since I like my wife a lot, I'm happy to work from home. I mean, during the COVID lockdowns, we were like, oh, rats. Karen and I are real homebody. So they've got a new Brittany Jackson who's doing just an amazing job with the social media there. And she is now taking over what was my desk, my office there at Skywatch. But with Drew Graffia behind the scenes and Joshua Dorland, now John Anderson doing a lot of the editing. And they're really working hard to put quality into every production, every show, not to just make it look good for the sake of looking good, but to help illustrate the messages that are being delivered. Because you can have a nice studio and you get good camera work and all that, but if you can illustrate what's being discussed, and Sharon and I try to do that from home here when we're talking about, say, events that took place in Israel thousands of years ago. It helps to put up a map. Where did this happen? So we're learning to do these things, and we're really doing it on a shoestring budget. And really, for all of the quality that you see in the studio there, Tom Horn put money where it needed to be put, but we really do a lot very, very efficiently. And so the editing and the production quality that goes into Skywatch TV each week that Drew and John and Joshua are really responsible for, they're doing it on consumer grade Macintosh computers. I mean, we're not using high-end Hollywood style souped up video editing machines. So it's all about being good stewards of what's been entrusted to us, because what we do here, what Tom and what the team at Skywatch do, what you do, is in large measure dependent upon the generosity of people who support the work that we do.
Exactly. I'm glad you mentioned that, because, there's so many times people bring up finances and money and think that these are, big multi-million-dollar operations, and we're just as if for Paramount Studios or 20th Century Fox. It's not like that. It's really, like you said, it's really being good stewards and stretching all the financing. And everyone there is really putting in a lot of time, and it's so important. It's so important, and to get the message out. So
we're serving our king. So what better job can you have?
Amen. Amen. Shout it from the rooftops. But if you can broadcast it to 92 million homes, even better. So before we jump into the questions, why don't you just do you want to just share a little bit about, again, you talked about you and Sharon kind of branching, and also you have an app as well.
Yeah, it's we call it GHTV, and we just because. We do everything from our house. We've had the website gilberthouse.org for I don't know 17 years or something like that, and just within the last few years we've made that sort of our web hub, where every week we produce an audio Bible study, essentially a podcast, where every Sunday we upload another edition of verse by verse exegesis of the Bible. We've been doing that since 2014, and that's really provided the research for the books that we write. I mean, we got to Exodus 14 and read Moses, God told Moses, tell the Israelites to turn back. Like, wait a minute. I don't remember that from the movie. What happened there? So that led to research. Well, the Israelites turned around. Why did God have them turn around? Why did he tell them to go to this specific place before crossing the Red Sea? And things like that. So that's on our app, Sci Friday, Unraveling Revelation, my weekly podcast, A View from the Bunker, which we've been producing since 2009. Now we're going back and putting up old audio episodes of PID Radio, which was our podcast that we started in 2005, which really started this whole thing. So all of that is available in an app. You can find the link for the app at gilberthouse.org. It's a mobile app, iOS, Android, Amazon Kindle Fire tablets and phones, plus a Roku channel. And again, it's free. And when you download that, because it's produced by a Christian company that doesn't censor what we do,
oh, there you go.
We'll say something about, mandates or lockdowns or whatever. It's not going to get yanked. So, that's really the best way to follow our stuff, is to get that app.
Yes. And the links to Gilbert House Fellowship, to Unraveling Revelation, to the podcast, to the app, it's all in the description. All the links are in the description of this video as well. So, and you already gave a little teaser, so I know people want to know, what are we talking about tonight? I try to give a little tease in the title of this video. So I'm thrilled, perfectly blessed that we're going to actually discuss some of the newest things you've been looking into and researching.
Oh,
And the
picture
first question we're
audio.
going to look at is going to be, we're going to start looking at Sodom and really some of the archaeological discoveries around Sodom and what you found from Scripture that really gives us more information as to what was really taking place. We talk about the sins of Sodom, so I'm really excited for that. Then we're going to jump into the question about planets, and is there a connection between angels and planets? You know, and of course, I'm sure you will probably delve into the second coming of Saturn during that question. And then, you know, because I got so many questions, we're going to do a little rapid fire Q&A because I know some people have some questions they want to ask you. So I put some together from what we got during the week. So we'll do that. And then hopefully we'll have a few minutes left to do some overtime and take some live questions and have a great time. So everyone buckle up. And as always, there will be 2 live winners of a prize tonight. I'll announce 2 winners. If you're watching live, you're on the end of the show. And you mentioned Terry James. So today he's up. So we have the Discerner's book. And this is a compilation book here that I contributed to chapter 2. We have many great authors, Terry James, Bill Salas, Jan Markell, Dr. David Reagan, all sorts of end times topics. And I think it's going to be very relevant for tonight about having discernment in the end times, discerning the signs of the times. And I think you kind of inspired me because I think this first question, what you've stumbled upon and what you're digging into is really an excellent example of how we can need to walk circumspectly, looking around as to what's going on in the world and how does it inform us in terms of Scripture and in terms of prophecy. So 2 people will win a signed copy of Discerners. And of course, for our replay watchers, we're trying it again. We got to do it. We did it before. We did it twice, but we've been tripping up the last 2 weeks, but I'm doing my like challenge again. So let me bring it up real quick here. It is our 400 like challenge. If you're watching on replay, you didn't watch it live, you're wondering, how can I win something? I want to be a part of the fun. Well, guess what? You are a part of the fun. So here it is. If on any of the channels, you see on my social media channels there, if any individual video gets 400 likes, make a comment. So obviously to demonstrate that you are in it to win it. And you'll win the Judgment of the Nephilim prize pack. You will get the Judgment of the Nephilim book. You'll get the study guide, the documentary, the t-shirt. You get everything. If we had a hat, you get a hat too, but we don't have that yet. So that'll be for our replay watchers. So, all right. Now we got that all out of the way. Let's should we jump into these questions here?
Absolutely.
All right. So question number 1 we're looking at, and again, I'm really just going to try to turn it over to you. Is really we talked about. I called it the secret, the spiritual sin of Sodom, and so I really just wanted you to share kind of what you've been researching recently and what you've discovered and how it relates to the sins of Sodom in the book of Genesis. Because I've always thought personally that there's much more to it than the kind of traditional church story, that this is really kind of a story that's really speaking on the sin of homosexuality. And this is what caused God's reaction to judge the city with fire and brimstone. And my position is there's much more going on than that you have the interaction of the angelic realm, and that there's a lot more there going on. So I was very, very excited to hear what you've been looking into on that question.
Well, this is something that Sharon and I have been really curious about for a while. We wrote about it in our book, Veneration, which came out a few years ago, which really dealt with the cult of the Nephilim. Basically, it was about the cult of the dead in and around ancient Israel and how it affected the Israelites spiritually, and how God tried to correct them to move them away from it. Now, obviously, we know that Sodom and Gomorrah were destroyed in the days of Abraham and Lot. There's some question as to when that happened. I had put the timeline of Israelite history to where Abraham and Lot were in the Holy Land and were in Canaan in the 18th century BC. And that's if you only allow for 215 years of Israel being in Egypt from the time of Joseph to the time of Moses and the Exodus. If you take the 430-year view, which some scholars do, that pushes obviously Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob back about 215 years. And outside the time of when the archaeologists working at a site in Jordan, northeast of the Dead Sea, across the river from Jericho, called Tal El Hammam, that's when they place the destruction of a city there, a rather large city, at about 1750 to 1700 BC. Well, this begs the question: why did God find it necessary to destroy it? And later, 400 years or 215 years later, why was it necessary for God to send a plague that destroyed and killed 24,000 Israelites? This is recounted in Numbers chapter 25, the first 9 verses. That's where they began to worship a deity, a god called Baal Peor. And it clearly had to be in the region of this area northeast of the Dead Sea. Now, let me back up and discuss the evidence for this site called Tal El Hammam being the biblical Sodom. About 16 years ago, an archaeologist who's a professor at Trinity Southwest University in Albuquerque began digging at this site. He was looking for a project. They've been working at a site in Samaria, which the world calls the West Bank. Things got a little dicey then, Intifada, so was not really a safe place for them to dig. This was a site called Kermit El Makader, which they believe was the biblical Ai, the city that Joshua and the Israelites destroyed right after Jericho.
Sure. Yeah.
So he's looking for another project, and he told us the story actually, because we were at an archaeology conference that Trinity Southwest put on 2 weeks ago. We were there last September. They decided to have it again this year. We went back, and we had the opportunity to interview Dr. Collins. He said that he was leading a tour of Israel or Israel and Jordan back around 2003 or 4, and at that time it was sort of the accepted belief that Sodom and Gomorrah were located southeast of the Dead Sea, a site called Bab Edra. And so he's in the hotel, he said, leading the tour the night before he starts going through the book of Genesis to brush up his scriptural knowledge of Sodom. And he said, oh, wait a minute, the scriptures don't line up with the location of Bab Edra, because Abraham and Lot basically were in the area of Bethel, which is north of Jerusalem, hill country. And when they decide they're going to split, Lot looks up, which in the vernacular of the ancient Near East means he was looking to the east. Looking up means you're looking towards the rising sun. Going to the right is south, left is north, and so on. So you can't see Bab Edra, which is the southeastern corner of the Dead Sea, from Bethel.
Just shut the door.
Bethel is north and west of the Dead Sea. But when you look up from there, you can see the well-watered plain, the Jordan Valley, north of the Dead Sea. And so he started looking for sites, megalithic sites that, sites that look like they might house an ancient city. And there was this big hill that it kind of extends out into the valley, about 8 miles northeast of the Dead Sea. It's pretty much directly across from Jericho. And no one had ever dug there because it's so big. They thought, okay, that's just a hill. That's too big to be a natural tell or tall in the Arabic. But they went up there and they started looking around, and there's like, wait a minute, we've got like Bronze Age pottery up here, right? And stuff. So they started digging, and 15 years later, they've excavated down to a destruction layer. They found that this city was actually massive. The defensive fortifications were massive. It was based on based on what they found in terms of the buildings and the pottery at the levels as they go down. They determined that this city was continuously occupied from about 4000 BC, which is the end of the Copper Age, the Chalcolithic, down to the time of Abraham in the Middle Bronze Age. And so from 4000 BC down to about 1700 BC, give or take, it was continuously occupied. In fact, it was the only city continuously occupied in the southern Levant, which is Israel, Jordan, Lebanon, Syria, for that entire period, because around 2300 BC, there was a climate change, and the climate dried up. The cities couldn't support people anymore, and they basically were abandoned. People had to become nomads in order to follow the water, except at this site, Tal El Hammam, because there's a spring that flows continuously year-round and then leads down to the valley, which is why it's a well-watered plain.
Exactly.
To give you an idea how big this site was compared to the sites that we've heard about, I mean, given the importance in the Bible of Jerusalem or Jericho, Dr. Collins says they could have put 8 to 10 Jerusalems inside the city walls of Sodom, and 10 to 12 Jerusalems, possibly 8 to 10 Jerichos. Okay, so 85 acres inside the city walls of Sodom Jerusalem at the time was about 10 acres and Jericho was about 12. So this was the biggest city south of Mount Hermon, except maybe for Hatzor, which is north of the Sea of Galilee. So this was a really important city. Now, by comparison, Babed Dra was tiny, smaller than Jerusalem, and it was destroyed around 2300 BC when everything else in the Levant fell apart because of the climate change issue. And it was never a place where you were going to water your flocks and herds anyway, unlike the Jordan Valley just north of the Dead Sea.
Shut my door.
You had a spring coming from the west from Jericho and one coming down from Sodom.
Right.
What really convinced us was when I interviewed the director of scientific analysis there, Dr. Philip Sylvia, and he told me that when they got down to the destruction layer, where everything had been blown apart in one direction, like a massive explosion, pushed all the bricks and the mud brick and the stones of the rampart walls in one direction from southwest to northeast. They found, as they got to the site every morning, it was crusted over with like a white crystalline substance. Now, bear in mind, this is 8 miles away from the Dead Sea. So they took some samples and they sent it out for testing. They found that the sulfates and the salts in the stuff that they found at this site, which is 75 feet above the level of the valley, matched exactly the chemical composition of the water in the Dead Sea.
Amazing.
So there's a lot more evidence there that they go into, but that cinched it for us.
Absolutely.
It also would help explain a couple of things. When Moses and the Israelites got there, and we'll say 400 years later, they camped at a place that they called Shittim, or Abel Shittim. And Shittim means acacia. Well, they did some soil samples down in the valley, and they found that at the levels, when they got down to the Bronze Age level, the salt content in the soil 8 miles north of the Dead Sea was so high that nothing could germinate. So it stayed that way. It gradually leached out of the soil until about 700 years later, around the time of David, they were able to start farming the area again. But in the time of Moses, 400 years before David, the only thing that would grow there was acacia because it's salt tolerant. So suddenly we have okay, all right, well, that would explain it. Meadow of the acacias, nothing grows there except acacia because it can deal with the salt content.
Right.
Second, suddenly, if you imagine an explosion over the Dead Sea that was so powerful, it sucked up all of this salt water, which was like, what, 30% or 36% salt, and scattered it across 8 or 10 miles of the valley floor up to a height of 75 feet, the city of Sodom. Suddenly, we have an explanation for the story of Lot's wife.
Exactly. Ooh, this is good. Yeah, yeah. Nice.
They made up. She turned around. She got hit with a blast of 700 mile an hour. That's what they estimate the wind speed was from this blast, which is a few times more powerful than the most powerful tornado on record.
Yeah.
Hit with a wave, like a blast of superheated saline. Yeah, she became a pillar of salt instantly.
Right. Yeah, yeah, exactly.
All right.
Wow, that's really good.
So this is what's going on at Sodom. And in the days of Lot, we know the story. The angels who came to warn Lot and his family to get out of town, the men of the city wanted to know them in the biblical sense. And we believe it's because the people of Sodom, the men of Sodom, realized that these men were special in some way. These were divine. They were supernatural. And if we can somehow dominate, I don't know. I don't know. But somehow they thought they could imbue the power from these visitors. More than that, I think we were looking at what was being worshipped at Sodom. They've gotten down to the expedition has gotten down to the level where they've excavated the foundations of the temple. And I noticed as we were writing the book Veneration, I remembered something when I read Dr. Collins' book back in 2015. So we got a promo copy at Skywatch TV. Sadly, we never had him up to interview him, which would have been awesome. But he mentioned just in passing that at the base of the city of Sodom were 1,500 dolmens.
Okay, Kelly, thanks for joining.
Estimate 1,500 dolmens. Now,
God bless.
Yeah, I was about to say, yeah. Can you explain what they are?
It's a word that comes from Britannic. This is it. It comes from a Britannic word, a Celtic word that means table, because they generally look like megalithic tables, 2 big or 3 big vertical slabs, and then a capstone across the top. They're found all over the world, which is why you've got a Celtic word for it, because the British soldiers who stumbled onto them in the Jordan Valley in the middle of the 19th century remembered seeing some in Ireland. So they're in Ireland, they're in England, they're in the Caucasus, they're in Korea, they're in Israel, but there are more of them clustered in Israel between Mount Hermon and the Dead Sea than anywhere on earth. There's an estimated 25,000 of these things. The oldest ones are near the Dead Sea, which is where ancient Sodom was located. The newer ones are up in the north in the Golan Heights. And maybe we can talk about that later on, but specifically around
Bashan, right? I mean, it's Avad Bashan country. That's there, so that's definitely Nephilim territory. Yeah,
exactly right. Those are the newer ones, but the oldest ones are found down around Sodom, and there were 1,500 of them, more of them clustered around that city than anywhere else in the Jordan Valley. So Dr. Collins just kind of mentions this in passing, like, oh yeah, okay, dolmens. Karen and I, when we started researching the Rephaim, is because we started pulling on this thread, because it's a mystery. We want to figure it out. Led to the writing of the book Veneration. You got to talk about the dolmens, because these are megalithic funerary monuments. Scholars don't know exactly what they were for, but they agree they had something to do with the dead. Now, were they tombs? Were they monuments? There's disagreement there. It appears that in the north of the Yarmouk River, which enters the Jordan just south of the Sea of Galilee, comes in from Jordan and Syria, in the Golan Heights, ancient Bashan, it looks like they may have been used as tombs, but in the south, they were not. And this relates to the interview that we got to do with Dr. Collins just a couple of weeks ago. Now, in our book Veneration, we wrote about the connection between all of those dolmens at the base of Sodom and the cult of Baal Peor, or Baal Peor. The Israelites were drawn into that in Numbers 25. Israelite prince, Midianite princess, in the sight of Moses and all Israel, performed some sort of a rite. And Phinehas, this grandson of Aaron, was so outraged, he took a spear and he speared them both. And there's only a couple of physical positions they could have been in for him to get them both with one.
Right. Yeah, for sure.
It was probably a fertility rite. In fact, the word, the scripture says he stabbed the woman through her belly, and that word belly can mean specifically the pelvic region. So it's probably a fertility rite. But as we start, okay, who was Baal Peor? Because he's only mentioned there, really. The word Peor, according to scholars, probably derives from a Hebrew word that means cleft or gap or opening, as in the Lord of the opening to the netherworld.
Right.
Or as we're going to put it in our forthcoming book we're working on now, The Gates of Hell, Lord of the Gates of Hell. So a cult of the dead connected here somehow. Well, how does this relate to the dolmens? We had a chance to talk to Dr. Collins a couple of weeks ago, and in the interview about Sodom, we said, well, look, we've talked with Dr. Sylvia, who's the director of scientific analysis, and he's given us an interview and talked about all the scientific evidence, so we've covered that. We want to talk about the dolmens. And so he said, well, okay, what they found 3 dolmens. Now, they've not published this yet specifically. They put this in some of their seasonal reports. At the end of the dig season, they'll go back to the university, they'll sort through the pottery, and then they'll write up a report. Here's what we did in season 12. And in a couple of those, they wrote up some of what they found. And I saw you put an image up here recently. That was some of what they found inside one of the dolmens. Now, almost all of the dolmens in the Jordan Valley, well, everywhere really, have been robbed out. Treasure hunters will dig into the dolmens and try to find whatever they can and sell it on the antiquities market, the black market. But they found 3 dolmens at the base of ancient Sodom that had not been robbed out. And we didn't know that because I thought they'd all been robbed out. Now, what you're seeing here on the screen, this is some of what they got out of one of the dolmens. And they found, to their surprise, that even though some of the oldest dolmens in the area appear to date back to the end of the Copper Age, the Chalcolithic period, which is around 4000 BC, they found bits of pottery that they can confidently date to the time of Abraham and Lot, the Middle Bronze Age, which means they were used continuously for probably 2,000 years, maybe 2,500 years for the same sort of rituals. And they were not used as tombs. What they found were grave goods, offerings, bits of pottery, maybe some olive oil, maybe a drink offering, and a bone, perhaps a bone of an ancestor, because they did find tombs, shaft tombs, in the area. These are basically just shafts dug into the earth, and they would put the dead in them. They would perhaps put them on top of the dolmen until, sky burial, I guess they call it, until they were defleshed by birds, ravens, vultures, whatever. And once they'd been defleshed, then put them in the tomb. But then apparently once a year, there would be some sort of a ritual where they would go to the tomb, remove a bone, and then take some offerings, beads, pottery, whatever, and place it in the dolmen. And this went on because, again, this city was continuously occupied for more than 2,300 years.
Yeah, so we had to unpack this. You just dropped a lot of really good revelation on the show. So basically, essentially, if we kind of look at it from the big picture, this dolmen or the dolmens, they're untouched. Like that pottery, that's basically pottery that has not been touched for millennia. Right? From the time going back to the days of Abraham and Lot. Yeah. And contrary to the common perception that these were just basically tombs, this was serving. These were places of worship, at least in the Jordan Valley, in the area of Sodom and Gomorrah and the surrounding cities. Right. And again, combining with what we see in the Book of Numbers with this fertility rite, that is it possible? Are we saying that it's possible then that what was really going on in Sodom was much more than just fornication and lust? This was actually a cult ritual for the purposes of accessing the supernatural realm, the fallen angelic realm, trying to again tap into that power. And then and what I think about too, just listening, just in the few minutes that we spoke about this before the program, you got my wheels going. I was thinking, wow, you think about the comparisons that, God, of course, visits Abraham, the Lord Jesus Christ visits Abraham in the chapter before to warn and tells him, it reveals what he's going to do. But, the way that the Lord describes and says that the sins of Sodom, I heard them from heaven, they cried up to heaven, and now God has come down. So what is that to me? I thought of Tower of Babel. Mm-hmm. God says, let us go down and confound the language, where it's something so serious and so severe that God has to personally come to earth into the human realm to stop it. And and I think, of course, again, when we think of Tower of Babel, of course, again, I believe that there was there was a supernatural purpose to the construction project. It wasn't just to make a skyscraper; it was to access the angelic realm, the spiritual realm. And so I think so what you're saying is that this is what was really going on in Sodom. It was way more than just fornication, way more than homosexual relations. This was about fertility rites and accessing the spirit realm.
Exactly. It's more than just this fertility rite. It's that they were this cult of the dead. And this is confirmed in Psalm 106, verse 28, which explains that it wasn't the fertility rite that made God angry, so angry that he sent a plague that killed 24,000 Israelites. It reads, then they yoked themselves to the Baal of Peor and ate sacrifices offered to the dead. They provoked the Lord to anger with their deeds, and a plague broke out among them. It was eating the sacrifices offered to the dead that provoked God to anger. Now, who were the dead? Not really the spirits of the dead ancestors. These were the demonic spirits of the Nephilim, the giants destroyed in Noah's flood. I think, and this was the speculation we put forth in the book Veneration, and I reiterated this in my book Second Coming of Saturn, that we think the Baal of Peor, the Lord of the opening to the netherworld, the Lord of the gates of hell, is this character referred to as Shemiyaza in the book of First Enoch, as El by the Canaanites, as Molech by the Hebrews, as Ashur by the Assyrians, Enlil by the Akkadians and Babylonians, Dagon by the Amorites and Philistines, Kronos, Baal-Haman, Saturn, and I think he's the entity that comes out of the pit in Revelation 9, the angel of the bottomless pit of Abaddon, or Apollyon. So I think actually that the connection to the Tower of Babel also relates to this entity, because this is post-flood. Babel is post-flood. Who is in the abyss? Well, the Shemyaza and his colleagues, the Watchers, the sons of God from Genesis chapter 6. I think there's a connection between the Tower of Babel and the temple of Enki, the god of the city of Eridu in southern Mesopotamia. This would be southeastern Iraq today. Enki was the clever god, the god of magic and supernatural, and he originally had all of the principles of human civilization, called the Mez, until they were stolen by Inanna, or Ishtar, his niece. She got him drunk, and he fell asleep, and she ran off with the Mez. Anyway, Enki's temple was called the Eabzu, or House of the Abyss. So if this temple, which is known from the archaeological dig done by scholars in 1949 at Eridu, they found 18 levels of this temple, the oldest ziggurat in Mesopotamia, and it would have been the largest, larger than the great ziggurat of Ur for the moon god, larger than the temple of Marduk in Babylon, but it was never completed. According to the archaeologist report, right at the end of the Uruk period of history, which ended around 3100 BC, the temple was abandoned before it was completed. The final phase, level 1, would have been the largest ziggurat in all of Mesopotamia. It was abandoned and suddenly, just very quickly, covered over with sand.
Yep. Confounded. Sounds like they were confounded. Amazing.
Yeah. What were they trying to do over the abyss? Could they have literally built a, maybe not. God found it necessary to interrupt whatever it was they were doing.
Exactly.
I think connected to the same worship of this old entity, Enlil, El, Molech, Saturn, Kronos. I think, and it didn't dawn on me until after I'd written the book. It's like, one of those light bulbs that should have gone on months before. God put this entity and his colleagues in chains and gloomy darkness. That's how they're described by Peter and by Jude.
Absolutely.
Satan is still walking the earth. So this entity, the chief of the Watchers, Shemyaza, did God see him as more dangerous, a more imminent threat to his creation than Satan? I think so.
Yeah, I mean, and what they did was so severe, right? I mean, and then you see it, and the flood on top of that, that dragged them down to the abyss. So so I think you're really onto something. And like I said, you really got me thinking. I wanted to throw some things at you, because I think that we actually see even other examples that kind of support your interpretation here in Scripture. So I want to just look at an example that from the book of 2 Kings, from the reign of King Josiah. And so, of course, King Josiah came in. He was the boy king, came in at 8 years old. And we won't go through the whole passage, but this, for those who are listening, and it's 2 Kings 23, and this is verses 2 and 3. And this is when he's instituting a revival. He's getting rid of the occult practices that have been plaguing Israel. And so you see some of the things he's doing here. It says, that he read the scriptures to all the people, small and great. He stood by Pillar. They made a covenant to basically commit to the commandments and statutes that were written in the book of the law. And so this is, again, a time of revival. And I found some really interesting details here. So I'm going to go ahead from verses 2 and 3 and go on to verses 4 and 5. And this is where the revival begins. And so it says here that the king commanded Hilkiah the high priest and the priests of the second order and the keepers of the door to bring forth out of the temple of the Lord all the vessels that were made for Baal and for the grove and for all the host of heaven, right? And so then it says that, and he burned them without Jerusalem in the fields of Kidron and carried out the ashes of them unto Bethel. And he put down the idolatrous priests whom the kings of Judah had ordained to burn incense in the high places in the cities of Judah and in the places round about Jerusalem. Them also that burned incense unto Baal, to the sun and to the moon and to the planets. Already a preview for our second question, and to all the host of heaven. So they were worshiping again and venerating not just the sun, the moon, and the stars, but also the planets. And then here, as we get to verses 6 and 7, it gets really interesting, because it says again that he brought the grove from the house of the Lord without Jerusalem unto the brook Kidron and burned it in the brook Kidron. So he's destroying every occult iconography that's in the country. And it says that he ground them to powder, but then it continues in the highlight section. It says, and he break down the houses of the Sodomites that were by the house of the Lord, where the women were wove hangings for the grove. And he defiled Topheth, which is in the valley of the children of Hinnom, that no man might make his son or his daughter to pass through the fire to Molech. So here I found it interesting that they talk about the house of the Sodomites. And of course here it's not, I don't think it's an ethnic identification. I think it's referring again to those who are doing these occult kind of fertility, fornication rituals for the purpose of actual occult practice, not just for lust. So this was about, again, accessing the spirit realm, and it connects it to these women who are weaving hangings for the grove, for these groves that would that house the idols and house these demonic forces and these kind of icons and figures to the idols, and it connects it also to Moloch. So you see this whole connection again of Sodom, ritual, Moloch, the planets, stars, all connected. So I just really, I was like, so what are your thoughts there?
Well, one of the other things I noticed is that he carried the ashes to Bethel. And
yes,
it was likely to desecrate the high place of Bethel, because remember, previously, Jeroboam, after he split away the northern kingdom, had set up golden calves at Bethel and at Dan, and there's some debate as to who the god was that was being worshipped there. There are those who say, okay, these are just representations of Yahweh, but of course he wasn't supposed to be represented by idols, and so that's what his sin was. But I think there's more than that at work here. Bethel means the temple of El, or the house of El. And again, I argue in the second coming of Saturn that El and Molech are the same. In fact, there was a scholar who did some really good work. He was looking at the available names from the kingdom of Ammon. And Second Kings tells us that Solomon built a high place on the Mount of Olives for Milcom, who's the abomination of the Ammonites. He was the national god of the Ammonites. But then later you see that it's referred to as Molech. Well, Milcom, Molech, basically same word in different languages. And in Ammonite, Milcom is like the Hebrew Melech. It just means king. So this scholar, in looking at the names of the Ammonites, all of the names in the ancient world had a theophoric element, a god name that was part of the name, like Hezekiah, Yah, or Micah, El.
Yes.
He said, well, okay, the national god of Milcom, you think that the national god of the Ammonites being Milcom, you find a lot of names of Ammonite kings and prominent people with Milcom as part of the name, but that's not the case. You find the most popular theophoric element among the Ammonites is El. Milcom was just his title. They just called him king. So El was the national god of the Ammonites, which means Milcom, Molech, is El. Now, the main epithet or nickname of El in the Canaanite literature is Bul El. Bul El. In fact, the prophet Hosea, condemning the golden calves that Jeroboam put up at Bethel and at Dan, there's a verse in Hosea 8, verse 6. Let's see, how does it go? For it is not from Israel a craftsman made it. For it is not from Israel a craftsman made it, but the actual Hebrew literally reads from Israel. Not it is from Israel, just from Israel, which makes no sense.
Right.
Scholar pointed out that when you regroup the consonants, because Hebrew has no vowels, you actually get for it is Bul El, a craftsman made it. So Hosea was condemning Jeroboam, who was leading Israel back to the worship of El. And of course, Beth El, the house of El, or temple of El, and Dan, which is at the foot of Mount Hermon, which was believed to be the place where El held court with Asherah and their 70 sons. So, Josiah taking the ashes to Bethel was making a statement. Okay, Molech, you have to burn stuff. We're going to desecrate your high place here at Bethel.
Exactly. And speaking of Asherah, another example that came to mind as we talked about this connection is in the book of Acts. And so this also was very interesting. So this here is in Acts 19. And this is interesting because it says Paul is empowered by God, the Apostle Paul, to do special miracles. And so here we see that he's healing people. You know, that the sick can just touch, you know, handkerchiefs or aprons, and they're healed by him. And then we get this account of these sons of Sceva, and it says that a Jew and chief of the priests, which did so, and it says that they were trying to cast out demons. They're trying to basically be exorcists. And so his sons, the sons of this man Sceva, try to cast out a demon out of a demon-possessed man. It says, and the evil spirit entered and said, Jesus I know, and Paul I know, but who are ye? And the man in whom the evil spirit was leaped on them and overcame them and prevailed against them, so that they fled out of that house naked and wounded. And that's Acts 19, 11 to 16. So they have this encounter where they clearly fail at casting out the demon, but in the demon proclaiming, I know Jesus, I know Paul, it actually led to revival. Because as you continue, it says that, and this was known to all the Jews and the Greeks, also dwelling at Ephesus, and fear fell on them all, and the name of the Lord Jesus was magnified. Because that proclamation, even by demonic spirit, told people, wow, this Jesus is real. He is who they claim he is. And so it says that many believed, and many that believed came and confessed and showed their deed. Many of them also which used curious arts. So these are the occult practitioners in Ephesus who brought their books together and burned them before all men. You know, again, shades of Josiah, taking the occult articles and just burning them. And they counted the price of them and found it 50,000 pieces of silver, which we know, of course, in modern money is a
Okay, Jay, God bless, mate.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks for joining.
So mightily grew the word of God and prevailed. And at the same time, there arose no small stir about that way. And it says, for a certain man named Demetrius, a silversmith, which made silver shrines for Diana, brought no small gain unto the craftsmen, whom he called together with the workmen of like occupation, and said, sirs, ye know that by this craft we have our wealth. So here you have the temple of Diana, and what are they doing? They're making shrines. Like the women who are weaving, you know, weaving hangings for the grove of the Asherah, right? And so again, we see that even 700, 800 years later, this practice is continued in the heart of Diana worship in Ephesus.
Yeah, that's one of the things that really stood out when we were researching veneration, and again, the second coming of Saturn, is the connection between soothsaying, consulting the spirits, necromancers and mediums to get information from the spirit realm, and the practice of burning children, offering them as sacrifice to Molech. This was explicitly tied together in Leviticus 20 and Deuteronomy 18, I believe. You've got connections there where God makes it very clear that you are not to do these things. You are not to consult necromancers or mediums, and the connection is in every case tied to the practice of child sacrifice. It is. Let's see here. I'm going to find this. Yeah, Deuteronomy 18 verses 10 through 12 and Leviticus 20 verses 1 through 6. The list of things that they weren't supposed to do. If a person turns to mediums and necromancers, whoring after them, I will set my face against that person, will cut him off from among his people. God goes so far as to say, if a man gives one of his children to Moloch and do not put him to death, the people do not close their eyes to the man who burns his child to Moloch. I will set my face against that man and against his clan, and will cut them off from among their people. There's a connection. Again, it's the worship of the deceased ancestors, or what people thought were their dead ancestors. Again, the demonic spirits of the Nephilim.
Exactly. And I think there's an end time connection as well. And when you talk about provoking God, and so another thing that when you inspired me today to start diving into Scripture after you shared this amazing kind of interpretation with me was Deuteronomy 32.
Yeah,
we always talk about Deuteronomy 32, God dividing the nations among the angels of God, but Moses continues with a prophecy, I believe, of the end times apostasy and redemption of Israel and the vengeance of Israel's enemies by God. And if you look at some of the passages, it's almost everything you were just talking about here. So Here it says they provoked Yahweh to jealousy with strange gods, with abominations, provoked they him to anger. They sacrificed unto devils, not to God, to gods whom they knew not, to new gods that came newly up, whom your fathers feared not. And here's this also interesting. Look what it says as Moses continues. It says, for their rock is not as our rock, even our enemies themselves being judges. And so I believe that the rock of God's people is the Messiah. Jesus is our rock. So who is their rock? I believe this is a prophecy foretelling the Antichrist. When Israel, the unsaved remnant, the 2/3 will not be a part of the believing remnant, they will trust in the false rock. And then it continues. It says, for their vine, right? Jesus said, he's the vine. He says, for their vine is of the vine of Sodom and of the fields of Gomorrah. Their grapes are grapes of gall. Their clusters are bitter. Their wine is the poison of dragons and the cruel venom of apes. So we're seeing all these references to Sodom, the dragons, Satan.
Yeah.
Yes. Again, this is all talking about the Antichrist. In the final analysis, he's the fulfillment of the vine of Sodom. The worship of Antichrist. And
that's good.
And of course it ends by saying he's going to avenge his people, but ultimately he'll be merciful. So that's why I believe this is end times, is God's going to exact his vengeance in the Great Tribulation. But that 1/3 remnant, of course, is going to be saved and brought through the fires of the Great Tribulation and redeemed.
Yeah. Boy, that is good. And I love the way that verse concludes, verse 43. Rejoice with him, O heavens, bow down to him, all gods.
Amen. That's right. Because and that's a great point too. Ultimately, it's going to be the judgment of not just unbelieving humanity, but of all the false gods, all the idols, the fallen angelic realm, the demons. They're all going to be punished in the Great Tribulation. And one last thing I just wanted to share was that you can see here again that in the end times, what do we see? The worship of the dragon. So you see that their rock is going to lead them to the dragon, that people are going to be worshiping Satan. Revelation 13:4, they worship the dragon, which gave power unto the beast. Revelation 9, this is after the punch. We talked about the abyss being open, about this being returning, Shemyaza, Apollyon, Abaddon, same being returning and tormenting, yet and still people don't repent. Revelation 9:20-21, and the rest of the men which were not killed by these plagues, yet repented not of the works of their hands, that they should not worship devils and idols of gold and silver and brass and stone and of wood, which neither can see nor hear nor walk. Neither repented they of their murders, nor of their sorceries, nor of their fornication, nor of their thefts. And again, that's Revelation 9:20-21. So again, you see the full, in the end times, what's going to be practiced: sorcery, the occult, the worship of Satan. So the Antichrist, I believe, is the rock, the other rock. And the vine of Sodom ultimately is going to lead people back to the worship of the devil himself.
Yes. This is really good stuff. What's really fascinating here, and I wish I'd seen this, but we'll have to credit you then when we incorporate this into our forthcoming book. This is really good. And the verse that I mentioned, by the way, this Deuteronomy 32:43, the translators of the ESV, which is what I'm looking at here, they go back to the Dead Sea Scrolls and the Septuagint, which has that verse, rejoice with him, O heavens, bow down to him, all gods. That's not in the Masoretic text, which is what most of our English Old Testaments are based on. But I think that's really fits the context here. What was really fascinating is that right after this prophecy that Moses issues, connecting the grapes of the vine of Sodom, the fields of Gomorrah, the grapes of poison, the poison of dragons. I think that's the correct translation, Tananim. Right after Moses does that, verse 48 of Deuteronomy 32, God says to Moses, go up this mountain of the Avarim, Mount Nebo. And Avarim is the Hebrew word that translates as travelers, which is the term the Canaanites use for the spirit of the Rephaim. And from there, he got his only look at the promised land. But from there, you can also look over to about the 2 o'clock position, and there's a little hill driving the valley, ancient Sodom. Now, here's the thing that Dr. Collins mentioned as we come back to Sodom again, that this, in fact, was proposed back in the 1930s by an archaeologist by the name of Nelson Glick. who did the first real systematic survey. Well, say post-World War I. I mean, the Brits had a lot of archaeologists working in Palestine back in the late 19th century. They were really scouting for the Foreign Office because they knew the Ottoman Empire was collapsing and they were wanting to see what they could get their hooks into. But they did some really good archaeology too, men like Charles Warren and Claude Condor and H.H. Kitchener and many others. Anyway, Glick traveled to Tal el Hammam and visited the site and noted, yeah, hey, looks like there was a big city here. Maybe this is where Moses and the Israelites camped. Maybe this is Shittim.
Yeah.
Now think about that. What if that was where they were camping on this site that had been devoted to this cult of the dead for more than 2,000 years until God wiped it off the earth with this meteorite blast over the Dead Sea? And they start worshiping this Lord of the dead. The pagan practices had continued even after that city was destroyed.
Amazing.
And they were right there on the city where that temple had once stood.
Amazing. And when you think about even in the end times, that I believe that Jesus is going to lead Israel from Edom over all the territory of Antichrist. There's a similar type of just ritual, just of establishment of rebuke of everything the Antichrist has done and established. So amazing stuff. As it was in the days of Lot. You have to remember that. It's not just the days of Noah, it's the days of Lot. I think you really stumble into something amazing here. So I was gonna say it'd make a great book, but I see you're already working on it. So yeah, that's great. That is great. But I appreciate you sharing that research. I appreciate it. And we can go on, but we gotta take a break because I want to get to question number 2, and I see there's a lot of comments in the comment section.
Wonderful.
So I want to make sure we have a little time to take some live questions because there's an inordinate amount of comments. People are pretty excited and I'm sure inspired by everything you shared. So we're gonna take a quick break, and we get back and we'll get to question number 2. And I promise I'll do a few questions from those who are watching live. So be right back.
I think there were a lot of different things that President Trump did for the country.
When we look at Genesis 6 from the supernatural perspective, it starts to answer a number of questions we see all throughout the Bible. Why would a loving God send a devastating flood that wiped out the entire global population, only leaving 8 people alive? Why did the Pharaoh, during the Exodus, order all the male children in Israel to be executed? Okay, and that was the trailer for Judgment of the Nephilim, Secrets of the Pre-Flood World. And for those who don't know, Judgment of the Nephilim, of course, my first book, is a comprehensive biblical study of the Nephilim giants. A lot of what we're discussing today, Genesis chapter 6, why do we have a flood? Why are there angels in the abyss when the devil's not? And how does it all relate to our salvation? It relates in a huge way because it all connects to the first prophecy in the Bible, Genesis 3:15. Where we're told that God proclaimed our redemption through the seed of the woman. So it's all in Judgment of the Nephilim. You see some very nice comments there from Gary Stearman and Ellie Marzulli, 2 people that Derek knows very well. So it's available obviously in paperback, the DVD documentary, also in video on demand, and there's study guides for it as well. So we got to keep this moving. Because I don't want to I got to make my audience happy. So we're going to get to question number 2, and we'll do that, and then we'll get to at least 2 or 3 live questions. Does that work?
Yeah, absolutely. Now try to be more prompt. I'll be a little pithy.
Yeah, I like that. I like
Try to
that.
be pithy.
All right, so this is a question I've been asked a lot, and I'm excited to have you on because I haven't touched on it at all. And shout out to Camerlyn, longtime watcher of Thursday Night Theology, because she asked this question months ago, and I said, I'm like, and I said the answer's gonna come. And then once I knew you were coming on the show, I wrote it back and said, now your answer's gonna come. So, and this is the question about the connection between the angelic realm and planets. And so again, I'll just to set the table here. You see here we have some scripture. So this is from Deuteronomy. So this is actually Deuteronomy 4, verse 19. So sorry for the incorrect citation. It's actually Deuteronomy 4, and in verse 19 it says, "Lest," and this is of course God speaking, and going back to we're talking about rebuking idolatrous, occult behavior and practices in Israel, and getting to the stars and the host of heaven. God says, "Unless thou lift up thine eyes unto heaven, and when thou seest the sun and the moon and the stars, even all the host of heaven, and shouldst be driven to worship them and serve them, which the Lord thy God hath divided unto all the nations under the whole heaven." So God is saying, do not do this. Don't look up to the sky, to the host of the stars, the sun, the moon, and the planets. And speaking of planets here, we have a quote from the second coming of Saturn, of course, by Derek, and he's wrote, to reiterate, we identify Saturn, Kronos, as the watcher chief Shemiyaza, and he, like the rest of the angels who sinned, is still in chains in Tartarus. And then moving on, a little later, it says, did pagans of the classical era really look back on the pre-flood world with longing and nostalgia? Apparently so. And this desire to return to the golden age is still alive today. And of course, again, is from the second coming of Saturn. So just wanted to tee that up for you, because I like very definitive statements. You were like, we identify this is exactly who he is. But explain, can you kind of unpack, because we see it in scripture, this connection between planets and angels, just kind of explain that, for the viewers.
Well, we have to speculate to some degree because we don't know exactly how this works, but it's our belief that, and when I say our, I'm talking not in the royal we, me and Sharon, our breakfast conversations are often very much like this. We think that these entities identify themselves masqueraded as these heavenly beings or heavenly objects to the ancient world. And said, yes, I am the entity represented by the planet Venus, or I am the sun, I am the moon, whatever, to the pre-flood world. And that's how God describes them in the Deuteronomy 4 passage that you mentioned, the sun, the moon, and all the hosts of heaven, and bow down and worship them, things that he allotted to the nations. He basically, after the Tower of Babel incident, the Deuteronomy 32 worldview, when he divided the nations, he numbered them according to the number of the sons of God. Well, apparently these are the entities who then decided they would represent themselves to people as, the visible planets, Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, and the sun and the moon. And of course, the stars at night, all the hosts of heaven. And Isaiah even says in Isaiah, is it 24, where he will punish the host of heaven in heaven and the kings of earth on earth. And the sun and the moon will be shut up in a pit, and after many days will be punished. So, God describes them in sort of those same terms. And I think it was partly that he was reaching out to Moses and Isaiah and the Israelites where they were.
Yeah.
But we also see references to things like the stones of fire in Ezekiel 28, which is a reference to Eden. The rebel from Eden who was tossed out, who I believe was Shemiyaza and not Satan, was described as walking among the stones of fire. Well, in the book of Enoch, First Enoch, I think around chapter 21, I don't know that book quite as well as the Bible, and I'm no expert of the Bible either, but he is taken into the netherworld and he's shown 7 burning mountains, and he asks his angelic guide, who are these? Well, these are the angels who who didn't come out at their appointed time. So they sinned, and they're going to be punished here for, some extended period of time. But they're described as burning mountains. So when we look at Revelation, and John talks about a burning mountain falling into the sea, and then wormwood falling into the sea, the question is, Are we dealing with an entity or with a space rock? And the answer could be yes to both. Don't know. But
isn't it amazing? Isn't it amazing how the Holy Spirit works? You know, I said just last week I was saying how the Holy Spirit is the executive producer of this show. So now I got a surprise for you. Now that you just mentioned this, so there's such an amazing point. So here's what again, having just a few minutes we spoke, which you got me really thinking about, and I'll bring this up to you and tell me what you think about this. So let's see here. Okay, so this is one example here, of course, where Paul and Barnabas are actually called Jupiter and Mercury that we see in Acts chapter 14. But let's we talked before about Acts 19, this whole thing with the silversmiths and the temple to Diana who are making the shrines of silver to Diana. Later on in that passage, there's an interesting little excerpt in that passage where this is what just came to my mind. So here again, continuing Acts 19, you have Alexander now who comes in. They're trying to basically bum rush the Apostle Paul in this theater. And Alexander, a Hebrew, comes in to try and make peace. And he says, ye men of Ephesus, what man is there that knoweth not how that the city of the Ephesians is a worshiper of the great goddess Diana, and of the image which fell down from Jupiter? Seeing then that these things cannot be spoken against, ye ought to be quiet and do nothing rashly. And that's like Acts 19:35-36. And so he references this image that fell from the planet Jupiter. Well, here's a quote here from a 19th century commentary. It's actually a Christian magazine called The Quiver. And it says this image that fell from Jupiter, says the image that was worshipped in the splendid temple of Diana at Ephesus was doubtless a meteoric stone of this kind. It probably fell from the sky in the very place where the temple was afterwards built. And it had some rude likeness which it presented to a woman's figure, especially when subsequently improved by carving, suggested that it was the image of Diana made in heaven itself by the hands of the great ruler of the gods. And again, that's from The Quiver in 1890.
Now get this. There was a myth or belief among the Greeks. We call it myth, but it was actually their religion. They believed that when Uranus, the sky god, who was the equivalent of Anu in Mesopotamian religion and Caelus in the Roman religion, when he was fighting against Kronos and the Titans, threw rocks from heaven and landed on the earth and tried to create an army of these stones to defeat Kronos and the Titans. It wasn't successful, but these stones were called Betilia by the Greeks. Okay. Betilia, which is very near the Hebrew Beit El, which means the temple or house of El.
Yeah. Wow.
And they were worshipped all over the Mesopotamia. In fact, when you go to Petra, have you been?
No, I'm not. I'm not.
We're going to have to change that because they've got these carved images that are in these niches all throughout Petra. They've estimated like 550 of them. Scholars call them beetles, Betyls, but it's from the Greek Betilia, which is from the Hebrew Beit El or Beth El. Remember, Jacob set up a stone there.
Of course, yeah.
So again, it was a now what happened was the pagans took the idea. Jacob set up a memorial stone to mark the place where he'd seen angels ascending and descending from heaven.
Sure.
But they began worshiping the stones as though they housed the entities or would give morality to the gods. So
which is always the lore of idolatry, right? Like just you talked about, like, and I think there's a lot of real biblical credibility to what you're saying, because we're told in Scripture the devil masquerades, his ministers masquerade. So whether they say, hey, the power is actually in the stone, it's not in the true God, it's in the stone itself. That's where the power is. Or they just present themselves and say, I am Mercury, I am Saturn, I am Jupiter. It's really just a deception. It's just a deception. Mm-hmm. And that's just great points. And on that same note, as we speak of gods ascending and descending, I have something else I want to show you too that also came to my mind was, and this I don't know if you'd be familiar. I'm sure you probably heard of it, because I know you're a sci-fi fan. I don't know if you ever saw. There's a movie that was called Jupiter Ascending. And so
I've seen bits and pieces of it.
it was by the Wachowski brothers, now siblings, who made the Matrix film. They made this much later. And so this is, I actually haven't seen this film, but I've read extensively on it. It's really interesting because the plot of the film is that basically this alien race lives on some planet. It's ruled by this royal family, and they basically make all of their wealth by seeding these like primates on the planet Earth that evolve into humans, and then they actually wipe out the whole population to use the humans to make basically their bodies to make a serum for immortality. So they live forever by using human beings. So and on Earth, it's like normal Earth, modern Earth today. No one even knows they exist, and so the whole crux of genetic on the among the gods, right? The aliens, they're living with high technology. Everyone's doing DNA manipulation. Some people are part wolf, part human. They're mixing them. They're doing all sorts of mingling of seed. And then, of course, in the film, there's a character, you see the female there, whose name is Jupiter Jones, who's living on Earth. She's like a maid, working in a real tough job. She's, someone of not any note. It turns out that she has part of the DNA of the alien race, and she's the hybrid savior of the Earth.
Okay. There's more truth in that movie than the brothers knew.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I also think that it was interesting too that I felt the title is very similar to a much older film called Lucifer Rising. I'm like, it seems a little coincidental. They called it Jupiter Ascending, and there's so many connections between Jupiter and Satan.
Right.
And so
Jesus.
It also just came to mind in discussing these things, but yeah, I think ultimately it comes back to deception.
Absolutely.
And the end times can be no different. Or we see that whether it's as planets, whether it's as extraterrestrials from another planet, right? That is the devil is going to use unprecedented deception, and that's what the Lord warns us of in Matthew 24. So I agree. I agree wholeheartedly that the angels are representing themselves as planets. In ancient times, this is exactly what they did.
Yeah. It's interesting, if I can plug Sharon's series of novels,
Absolutely.
The Red Wing Saga. She is just finished novel number 8 in that series, but the Watcher class entities, rebellious Watcher class entities, and faithful ones play important roles throughout the series. And there are a couple who masquerade as the sun and the moon. Very interesting characters, and again, kind of speculative because we don't really know how this works. The Bible's not explicit there, but it's fascinating to imagine how they must see us and how they must feel about humanity, knowing that we've been told that we will judge angels someday. That we were really excited to find out that Timothy Alberino was seeing this parable the same way we do, the parable of the prodigal son. We are the prodigal son. I mean, yes, it's a parable about the importance of forgiveness, but we are the ones who've been given this wonderful inheritance called earth and given the order to go forth, to be fruitful and multiply and take dominion of this planet. And we squandered it. And we're reduced to serving the swineherd, the guy who keeps the pigs, the unclean animal.
Oh, we lost Eric. He was on a roll. So hopefully he'll come back in a moment. But in the meantime, I think I know where he was going with that. So that again, with the prodigal son, that basically, obviously, humanity, we gave up the incredible blessing that God gave us in Eden to give us dominion over the earth, and squandered it and wasted all of our inheritance. And of course, in salvation through Christ, what does God do? Puts a robe on us, puts a ring on us, prepares a meal for us, the feast. We see the great supper, right, in the great tribulation, that is the marriage supper of the Lamb. Of course, all this is just beautiful typology of our redemption and of the second coming of Christ. And so, all right, looks like Derek is, I think he is back. Let's see if we can get him back in the room. I'll give him a moment to set up his camera. I think he's coming back though. So But yeah, it's beautiful, beautiful typology. I think that's a great point there. So let's see here. So let's see. We will I'll take. Derek, you there? Yeah, I'm just trying. All right, not yet. So this is live TV, folks. This is what happens. So what we'll do now is we will take a quick break, and hopefully by the time Derek will have his connection all set up, and we will. I promise we will get to some overtime questions, guaranteed, coming up in just a moment. Let's see here. As we get ready for our break, I think I will make this a quick break, and we will just do the study guides.
Oh, he's back.
If you want to understand the interpretations, the etymology, the foreshadows, the typology, the ancient.
Try Zyrtec rapid acting tablets. No hay fever tablet works faster. $29.99 at Chemist Warehouse.
New Rocky Road. Discover Commissar Mango Sweets.
Ancient research, it's all in the study guides. Great for home study, group study, Sunday school, any context. It's good. If you want to really get into it and get deep. And speaking of getting deep into the Bible, he is now returned.
Yeah, that's one of the exciting things of doing it live. It used to be when I did my Sunday night podcast live, our dachshund would always start staring at me through the door just after coming back from a break. It's like, oh, really? Now? Okay, well, so God bless you for being brave enough to do this live.
Yeah, it's God is on the throne. We have issues all the time. It's all good though. It's like we're like one happy family here. I think.
Yeah, Diane, I saw that. He done that cover of I Like Candy. I forget his name, but he was only 34. I bet that's what happened.
Everyone, I get a lot of grace from the Thursday Night Theology audience whenever I have a tech issue. So it's all good. It is all good, my brother. So all right. So I'm gonna throw some questions that came during the week, and as you answer them, we're gonna do some rapid fire, and
okay.
I will then also start scanning the live Q&A questions. If there's anything you see, feel free to just jump right in. If there's a question that stands out to you, jump right in and just read it and answer it, and we'll just make it work.
Okay.
What is your position on the rapture? Pre-tribulation, mid-tribulation, post-tribulation?
Pre-trib, and it's because of the 70 weeks prophecy where
maybe he had COVID.
70 weeks were decreed for Daniel's people and the holy city. Presumably, Daniel's people means the Jews, and if we're now in that gap between week 69, when the Messiah was cut off, and week 70, which is the final 7-year tribulation period, presumably that means the church will not be here during the final week. So that's where I come down on that. Although we're open to pre-wrath, and but I think the evidence points to pre-tribulation.
Yeah, I agree. And let me ask you this too, because this was also another question, and one of the many people wanted to know your position on the rapture. Do you think that any of the seals have been opened?
Oh yeah, we wrote about this in our book Giants, Gods, and Dragons. We believe, and credit to our friend David W. Lowe, who wrote the book Earthquake Resurrection more than 15 years ago.
Wow.
We think that the first 5 seals have been opened. I mean, when you look at the book of Acts, well, back up. When you go to Revelation 4 through 6, and you see that the Lamb appears next to the throne of God and takes the scroll and begins to open them. When you go back to the book of Acts and see that Philip, as he was being martyred, saw that one like the Son of Man was at the right hand of the Father, and Paul writes in a couple of his epistles that we know that Jesus was at the right hand of the Father. If they knew about it then, within the first few years of the resurrection, it seems unlikely that here we'd be 2,000 years later with John in heaven and an angel crying out, is there anyone, no one has been found worthy in heaven or on earth or under the earth who's, okay, where's he been hiding for 2,000 years? No, we think he's opening those deals in the first century.
No way, he didn't die in a bathtub. That's a satanic ritual if he did that.
Yeah.
We're waiting for numbers.
He's worthy, right? He is worthy. Jesus is worthy. I agree completely. And the earthquake resurrection was excellent, but can't believe it was 15 years ago. But great book. Great book. That's one of my favorite books. Excellent, but very inspirational. And I'll do one more from the week, and then we'll do some live questions and wrap up. What is your position on the Nephilim returning after the flood? How do we have giants in the promised land after the flood? How did that happen in your estimation?
Well, we take the position that there are a couple of possible answers. Number one is that there was a second incursion. Number two is that, as Mike Heiser's pointed out, in Genesis 6, where it reads, the giants were in the earth in those days when the sons of God went into the daughters of man. The word translated when can also be whenever. So second incursion. Here's the other possibility, which we present in the book Veneration. The words translated descendant of in 2 Samuel, or is it 1 Samuel, where David and his men go out to do battle with the Goliath and his buddies. Is that 1 Samuel 18 maybe? I'd have to go back and look and find it.
The mighty men?
The mighty men, where they've got the 5 other giants who, including Ishbi ben Ov, who almost kills David. And they're described as descendants of the giant, or descendants of the giants, or descendant. The word translated descendant there, Yeladay, does not mean literal blood descendant. It is never used anywhere else in the Bible to mean that. When someone is a son of someone, Ben something, that means literal blood descendant. But the term Yeladay ha Rapha, means one who is a member of a group into which he's been consecrated or indoctrinated. So it's a one who, and this was based on an article from the 70s by a scholar named Conrad LaRue, who argued that Goliath and his buddies, rather than being literal blood descendants of the Nephilim, were essentially members of a warrior cult that venerated the spirits of the giants.
Interesting.
Evidence there, and I'm gonna find this now because it's bugging me that I should remember this because it's such an important point. That that's got to be 2 Samuel 18 because 1 Samuel 18 is David and Jonathan. Anyway, or 21 maybe. Anyway, the giant that almost kills David, Ishbi ben Ab, is how it looks. Brian Godawa, who's an award-winning screenwriter and has written a number of excellent fiction books based on the theology put out by Dr. Michael Heiser, pointed out that when you separate the word Benab, it's Ben Ov. And Ov is the Hebrew word that translates as medium or necromancer. Well, medium usually, but as I showed in the book Second Coming of Saturn, better scholarship shows that word actually means owner of a necromantic ritual pit. When Saul went to the medium of Endor the night before he died, he visited the Ov of Endor. And that word actually comes from a Hurrian word. Those are the Horites in the Bible. A Hurrian word, Abi, which refers to this necromantic ritual pit. They found one at the ancient city of Urkesh that goes back to like 3500 BC. They dug this hole, and the priest would descend into the hole, scribe a magic circle on the dirt, sacrifice a small animal like a piglet or a puppy, summon gods, air quotes, from the netherworld, and then ask for favors. And then they would send them back to the netherworld and they would cover up the hole. That's what the medium of Endor was doing.
Absolutely.
Samuel, the spirit of Samuel, came up from the earth. She had a ritual pit.
Interesting. That's a very unique interpretation. Right. I have more homework.
Writing fiction speculated that this Ishbi ben Ov, or Ishbi, son of the medium, was the son of the medium that Saul visited the night before he died. But I think what the evidence points to is that it means that Ishbi and his colleagues were in fact members of a demon-worshipping cult And I think that's what we're looking at with this cult of the dead. And that's what our book Veneration was about, this cult of the dead that surrounded ancient Israel, that Isaiah was warning the Israelites this, that, stop doing this 700 years after Moses and the Israelites had their encounter with Baal Peor.
Yeah, that's great stuff. They revoked him with other gods. Yeah.
Yes.
Great. So, all right, I found a question for you. And this is from Cindy Ann. This is a really interesting question. So, any thoughts or insights on that Satan had a demon that looked like a frog come out of him in Revelation 16:13? I mean, obviously we know that happens, but I think the question is getting at, it says that don't demons control? Seems weird that Satan would be controlled, and we know that God created evil. So I think kind of how does, obviously we know that happens. A demon is going to come out of the mouth of the devil, certainly, and the Antichrist, false prophet. But what do you think is going on there that they have the demons actually inside of them?
I think what they're doing is they're sending them forth to do work in the same way that in 1 Kings 22, when God says to the divine council, how are we going to trick Ahab into going into battle where he'll be killed by the Syrians? And one spirit says one thing, another spirit says another. Yeah. One says, I'll be a lying spirit in the mouth of all those prophets. Okay, go ahead, you'll do it, and it will be, you will succeed. I think it's something like that. Satan and his minions sending out these lying spirits to deceive humanity into going to war against God.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's a great example, actually. I agree that they are ordering them. The demons are subject to them. Yeah, I think that's right.
Right.
Yeah. All right, I have another here for you. Can you talk on the angel in Revelation chapter 10? The mighty angel in Revelation 10.
Let me scroll back there.
Ron Jones. That's that question.
Mighty angel coming down from heaven, wrapped in a cloud with a rainbow over his head, his face like the sun, legs like pillar of fire, had a little scroll open in his hand, right foot on the sea, left foot on the land, called out with a loud voice like a lion roaring. That's a really good question. Sharon and I touched on that a while back during our Unraveling Revelation study. There are varying opinions on that. I mean, is that Jesus? I don't think so, because a mighty angel, but I don't think he'd be described as an angel. I think he is one of the Watcher class angels, an archangel maybe, not identified by name, but one who's tasked with delivering that message, the trumpet call. So I think he's one of the heavenly host. Clearly a high-ranking and mighty, powerful angel.
Wow.
But who he is exactly, we can only get.
That book looks interesting, Diane.
Did see a question I want to address real quick. Was it Samuel that actually talked to Saul?
Wow.
I believe yes. And there are some scholars who disagree. That they think that God would not have appeared to Saul or used that type of method to deliver a message. But God certainly used pagan kings like Cyrus and Nebuchadnezzar, polytheists, to achieve his ends. So I think if it had not been Samuel, Scripture would have told us it was a spirit that was pretending to be Samuel to deceive Saul. But everything in the Bible about that incident indicates that spirit was the spirit of Samuel.
I agree completely. Yeah, and I think even the fact that that's the beauty of the details of Scripture, that the witch herself was so scared. But this was something unprecedented. This was something that she had never seen or experienced before, which is why she was so scared. And so I agree. I do think it was actually Samuel in a unique opportunity to actually speak in spirit form. And again, remember, we did see, in the New Testament, the Mount of Transfiguration, we see Moses and Elijah are speaking to Jesus. So it's the idea that a godly believer can die and actually appear again on earth in spirit form is, I think, clearly established at the Mount of Transfiguration.
Chris Putnam even wrote about that in his book, The Supernatural Worldview, about what appeared to be spirit apparitions that were allowed by God to deliver messages. But as the Apostle John wrote, whenever we encounter spirits, we are to test them, because not all are from God or allowed by God.
Some are, obviously.
Some exercising free will are in rebellion.
Yep, and Rick Harkins just said, could that have been a familiar spirit instead? And I think to Derek's point, there are lots of scholars who do believe that or interpret that passage as a familiar spirit. I just think that, Derek, I think your analysis is spot on in my estimation. So I take the position that it was Samuel. But certainly you will find, reputable theologians who believe it was a demon.
Right.
Or a familiar spirit.
I think that if it had been her familiar spirit, I don't think she'd have cried out with a loud voice. I think she was startled because what she saw was not what she expected.
Yep. Good. All right. Well, unless you have anything else, we can get to our prizes. Anything else that caught your eye? Otherwise, we will call out some winners and give out some books.
All right. Well, yeah, go ahead.
All right. I'll leave you some time. We can take a look. You take a look, and I'll get to our announcements, and we'll see if we have any time, if we're going to do any last overtime. So, our first winner, again, receiving a copy of Discerners. One got a copy of Discerners. Our first winner is Preston Gerard. So congratulations, Preston Gerard. Please contact me, DM me, contact me through the website, and you can receive your prize sent to you anywhere in the world. Okay, let me just put the banner up here too so you can see all the social media here. The winner number 2 is Beth Depot. And that's Depot as in D-E-P-O-T, just like Home Depot. Beth Depot, you are the second winner. So congratulations to you as well. You see all the social media there. You can contact.
Okay, guys, I'm going to call it quits too. Thanks for joining. See you guys.